Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Micaela Costanzo. Micaela Costanzo was born on May 3, 1994, in the small town of West Endeavor, Elko County, Nevada, USA. She was the youngest daughter of Celia and Theodore. She has two sisters named Christina and Delicia. She is famous for her cheerful personality, and she also easily spreading joy to her family and friends. She has a unique perspective on life. She uses her sensitivity to see the good in people and situations. Micaela was very close to her sisters, and they looked so alike that it was sometimes hard to tell them apart. In high school, Micaela became well known and popular. Initially, she stood out for her excellent grades, and later for her impressive performances on the track and field team, which she practiced diligently. Her peers saw her as a star. She also loved writing poetry, with a passion for literature and a dream of becoming a writer. When given the opportunity to demonstrate her storytelling skills, she eagerly took on the job of editing the school newspaper. Christina, her sister, witnessed her success firsthand, as they went to school together every day. Micaela and her mother, Celia, have a strong relationship, largely due to their frequent and open communication. Celia worked the night shift at a local casino, and little girl kept her informed of all her activities through messages. This thing allowed Celia to feel at ease, help her know where Micaela is and who she is with. This time, Micaela was going to meet Kody Patten, an acquaintance from childhood. Although they had grown apart over the years, they were reconnecting. 19 years old, Kody was also in high school and was popular, mainly because he was an outstanding football player on the school's team. His 2-meter height intimidated his peers, and his personality drew mixed reactions. At times, Kody could be extremely nice, but he also had a quick temper and could become easily irritated. Mickey's mother, Celia, recognized this about him. She acknowledged that Kody was an interesting young man who be incredibly sweet and charming. However, he was also emotionally unstable, making it difficult for both his classmates and parents to accept him. This may be why he aimed to join the Marine Corps after high school. He hopes it will help him find direction and purpose in life. Toni Fratto, Kody's girlfriend, was a strong supporter of his future plans. At 19, she was a former high school beauty queen and was deeply religious. Toni's parents still approve of Toni and Kody's relationship, even though Kody is not religious. Over time, Kody and Toni grew closer, and she became fully devoted to him. They got engaged and held an official ceremony at church. However, Kody's impulsive and hot-tempered nature remained an issue. After a heated argument with his father, Kody asked Toni if he could stay with her family. Her parents, Casey and Claude, hesitated when Toni suggested this idea, creating family tension. Toni's love for Kody, a young man with problems, was already a concern. Toni's parents feared that refusing Kody's request might lead their daughter to run away with him. So, they agreed to let Kody move in. They hope this will help them take care of their daughter, while also helping Kody succeed in the future. Over time, Toni's relationship with Kody's parents improved, and they acknowledged that Kody was not a stranger to their family. However, Toni remained uneasy. Even though Kody has proven to her that he wants to be with her, but she felt uncertain about their relationship, especially during his interactions with Micaela. Toni kept a diary to express her fears. She fears that Kody will fall in love with Micaela, and that he might leave her for Micaela. This tormented Toni, and her suspicions were not unfounded. Kody was secretly seeing someone else, but it wasn't Micaela, it was an older woman from out of town. Instead of reassuring Toni, he took advantage of her jealousy for his own amusement. He provoking her by interacting with Micaela in the school hallways and sending explicit texts. Toni responded to these provocations by publicly insulting Micaela. Micaela started a relationship with Javier, a young man from school. She wasn't interested in Kody, neither romantically nor as a friend. Therefore, it was unpleasant for her to encounter Toni, who was jealous and often insulted her. The situation worsened as Toni's attacks became more frequent, and arguments between Toni and Kody increased. They discussed their issues in front of classmates. On Thursday, March 3, 2011, Micaela went to school as usual. Christina informed Micaela that she couldn't pick Micaela's up after her running practice because she had a race out of town. Meanwhile, Kody had borrowed a van from a woman he was seeing and exchanged several text messages with Micaela throughout the day. After track practice, around 5 p.m., Micaela decided to walk home since it was only 2 kilometers away. As Micaela was leaving through the back door of the school, she encountered Kody. He attacked her, tied her hands, and forced her into a van. He then picked up Toni. They drove to the outskirts of town, to a vast desert area known as the Gravel Pits, about 8 kilometers west of the Nevada-Utah border. Once there, Kody and Toni pulled the girl out of the van, began beating her, and insulted her with horrible words. After hitting her several times with a shovel, they inflicted knife wounds on her and watched her die. They then removed Micaela's clothes and burned them along with her other belongings. Using the same shovel, Kody dug a shallow grave, placed the body inside, covered it with soil, camouflaged it with vegetation, and then fled the scene with Toni. When Micaela didn't show up and didn't answer calls or texts, her mother, Celia, became worried. As it was getting dark, she decided to leave work early. Celia returns home to find that her 2 older daughters, Christina and Delisha, have been asking around to see if they know where Micaela is. However, no one knows where Micaela is. So, she went to the police to report her youngest daughter, Micaela, missing. The West Wendy police immediately launched an investigation, led by experienced detective Donald Beckham. When they asked Celia if she had been in contact with Micaela in the past few hours, she replied no. The next morning, the police interviewed Micaela's classmates and friends, including Kody. Kody declared that the last time he saw her was with her boyfriend in front of the school gate. However, this contradicted the accounts of other witnesses. They said they saw Micaela at the back of the building after school. Meanwhile, at home, Celia is extremely scared and uncertainty. Delisha called and texted Micaela several times, hoping for a response. When they discovered Micaela hadn't come home the night before, Christina had dismissed it as teenage rebellion, but now she has changed her mind. Meanwhile, search parties scoured the desert around the city, while the police focused on questioning people close to Micaela, including her boyfriend Javier. He mentioned that Micaela was not someone who would hide things or act strangely. After 2 days of searching, investigators found several unusual things in the desert. They found fresh tire tracks, leading to a spot with fresh blood stains. There was also a suspicious-looking mound of dirt, covered in bushes. Detectives alerted forensic experts, and they quickly arrived at the scene. Upon excavation, they found Micaela's body, showing signs of beatings on her face and neck. A tie was also found in her hand. The police then reviewed the school CCTV footage for more evidence. As soon as Micaela's family was informed that her body had been found, Delisha broke down completely. Delisha felt as if a part of her had been taken away. She couldn't work or focus on anything, because she kept thinking about her younger sister's image, Micaela. Investigators have begun looking into Micaela's phone activity and her social connections. They discovered that at the time Micaela went missing, she had been calling and texting Kody, making him a suspect in the case. Further evidence came from school surveillance footage, which showed she and Kody together in the hallway leading to the exit. A few minutes later, she was gone. On the evening of March 6, Kody arrived at the police station for questioning, accompanied by his father, Keith. During the interrogation, officers showed him video footage from the school's surveillance cameras, but he insisted he was not involved in the incident. Meanwhile, lawyers and investigators gave Kody time to review the case materials and allowed him to speak privately with Keith. Worried, Keith urged his son to tell the detectives everything. Keith begs him to understand the severity of his actions. Now, he must make amends by answering to Micaela's family. He accepted the possible consequences and expressed his readiness to face them. He also told his story of the incidents that took place that day. Kody recounted that after school, he and Micaela went for a walk to the gravel quarry. While there, she asked him to break off his engagement to Toni and start dating her instead. When he refused, they had a heated argument. He claimed that Micaela hit him in the chest, and in self-defense, he pushed her away. Unfortunately, she hit her head on the car's rear bumper and began to convulse due to the strong impact. Panicking, he tried to knock her out by hitting her head with a shovel, but she stayed conscious. He then cut her throat. Once he realized Micaela was dead, he buried her. When questioned by the police, he said he thought about taking her body to a dump, but couldn't bring himself to do it. When asked about the zip ties on her wrists, he explained they were part of a plan to dispose of the body. After burying her, he sat there crying for several hours before going to find Toni. Despite his detailed account, Kody was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, possibly facing a death sentence. In this situation, Kody's family hired John Hudson, a well-known defense attorney. He specializes in helping murderers not receive the death penalty. Micaela's family didn't just feel the pain of losing their daughter, but were also in disbelief that Kody had so brutally killed his childhood friend. Christina was especially shocked and believed that if he was truly guilty, someone must have forced him to do it. On the other hand, from the start, Celia never believed his confession. She doesn't believe that Micaela considers Kody a friend, let alone ask him to be with Micaela's. Additionally, as a mother, she knew very well that Micaela hated scandals. When Kody was arrested, Toni wrote numerous letters to he, called him, and visited him whenever she could. She said she missed him so much and she would always support him. Meanwhile, the police tried to investigate further, hoping to find useful clues in their conversation. Toni's parents, Claude and Casey, were shocked by the incident and even asked Kody why he committed the crime. Kody simply replied that he didn't know why he did it. The lawyer pointed out that Kody's confession didn't explain all of Micaela's injuries, he suggesting that it was not an accident as Kody claimed. The injuries suggested they weren't caused solely by a shovel, implying that someone acted out of anger. To understand the situation better, the lawyer decided to question Toni. As the interrogation progressed, Toni appeared cold and indifferent. Her emotionless attitude is completely inappropriate, since she is Kody's wife, the man facing the death penalty in this case. In April 2011, just weeks after Micaela's death, Toni's parents left town, leaving her alone at home. That morning, Keith, Kody's father, arrived at her house and took her for a drive. During their conversation, he persuaded her to visit Kody's defense attorney and tell what happened. At the attorney's office, Toni agreed to let lawyer John document her account, which turned out to be completely different from what she had previously stated. Toni claims that after school, she received a text message from Kody, saying that he had kidnapped Micaela. The three of them then headed to the gravel pits. When Micaela and Kody got out of the car, they started arguing, but Toni said she couldn't see what happened. She only heard a noise that alarmed her, and she got out of the car to see what was going on. She saw Micaela lying on the ground and Kody digging what appeared to be a grave. When he stopped, Micaela was already unconscious. Then, they hit her several times with a shovel, and when she showed no signs of life, they took turns stabbing her. Toni also admitted to sitting on Micaela's feet to restrain her during her convulsions. The lawyer John, representing Kody and not Toni, quickly revealed Toni's confession to the police. Consequently, Toni, who was not initially a suspect, was arrested and charged with murder without bail. Forensic experts collected samples from Toni's home, car, and clothing to look for evidence that she was present at the murder scene. In mid-June 2011, the court decided that Toni should also stand trial for murder and kidnapping. The preliminary hearing was set for August 2nd, but in January 2012, Toni accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. In his testimony, Toni said that Kody was angry with Michael from the beginning. When she entered the van, she noticed that Micaela was very scared. Micaela sat in the back with her hands raised to her face. As they drove into the desert, Kody asked her to help him kill Micaela. Then, Kody asks Toni to watch Micaela while he digs a hole. Once he was done, he forced she to hit Micaela. She refused, so Kody began to beat Micaela. The next, he made she strike Micaela with a shovel. The blow hit Micaela in the shoulder. She then sat on the ground, holding Micaela's legs, and he attempted to slit Micaela's throat with a knife. 3 months later, the district judge sentenced Toni Fratto to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 18 years. The judge described it as the most brutal murder he had witnessed in his 20-year career. The motive for Micaela's murder remained unclear. On Wednesday, May 9, 2012, Kody appeared in court, pleading guilty to first-degree murder, also to avoid the death penalty. On Friday, August 24, in Elko Court, Kody Patten was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He was imprisoned in Nevada State Prison. Later, in an interview with a well-known television company, Toni shared a more dramatic version of the tragic story. She revealed that Kody had been abusive and controlling of her throughout their time together. She admitted that because of the abuse, she was unable to fight back against him. Looking back, she believed she could have been his next victim. She also accused he of forcing her to participate in Micaela's murder. She said after witnessing him brutally beating Micaela, she feared for her life, leaving her with no choice but to comply. Micaela's mother, Celia, was unable to work for a long time and avoided going to restaurants where she had previously visited with Micaela. She feels sad about her increasingly distant relationship with her other daughter, Delisha. She explains that the tragedy of Micaela's murder changed Delisha so much that Delisha dropped out of school and left the city, estranged from her family. Everything at home reminded her of Micaela, which was overwhelming. The tragedy devastated 3 families: her family, Toni's family, and Kody's family. It will take Micaela's family and friends a long time to get over this loss. Kody will never see his family outside of prison again. Although Toni may be released from prison in the future, her father sadly says that when that happens, he may not be alive. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Jessica Knott. Jessica Knott was born on June 22, 1986, in Allamon Springs, Florida. She grew up in a happy family with an older brother, a younger sister, and loving parents. Her father traveled frequently for work in several states, so he was not always home. As a child, Jessica was active and cheerful. She enjoyed spending time outdoors with her friends and siblings and had a special love for animals. On April 5, 1996, when she was 9 years old, her family decided to visit her grandparents for Easter. That morning, her father left the house to do some shopping, while her mother stayed behind to clean up and prepare for the trip. After school, Jessica came home and asked her mother if she could go out to play in the apartment complex. The area was relatively safe because it was far from the main road and had many trees around. Her mother agreed but asked Jessica to play only in the yard. A few hours later, around 6 p.m., Jessica's father returned home and asked his wife where Jessica was. She was surprised because her daughter was supposed to be in the yard waiting for her father, but he insisted that she was not there. The parents went outside and searched the yard but did not find Jessica. Feeling worried, they decided to ask the neighbors in the hope that someone had seen their daughter. One neighbor said that he had seen Jessica in the front yard, sitting on the couch reading a book. But that did not help in finding Jessica. When darkness fell and their daughter was still missing, they decided to call the police. The police arrived a few minutes later and began searching and interviewing the neighbors. Despite their efforts, they could not find Jessica, so they expanded the search area to nearby streets. A few hours later, the police station received an unexpected call. The caller's voice was drowned out by loud noise, but the operator could still hear it. The caller revealed that the police would find the missing girl near a water pump station a few miles from her home. The police rushed to the pump station to check on the caller's instructions and witnessed a heartbreaking scene. Before them was the body of a girl lying near the station, hidden in a black trash bag. Just a few meters from the road, the pump station was under a bridge and could not be seen. The police quickly identified the victim as Jessica Knott and turned her body over to the medical examiner. Meanwhile, investigators focused on finding the person who made the 911 call and reported the news, as they believed the call came from the killer. But there was a challenge. The call was made from a public phone at a gas station less than a mile from the crime scene, and by the time the police arrived, the perpetrator was gone. Detectives tried to find fingerprints on the phone, but it was quite a challenge. A public phone could have many fingerprints. Furthermore, investigators realized that the criminal could have wiped the phone after making the call or used gloves. Experts concluded that Jessica was killed elsewhere and her body was moved to the water pump station. Marks on the ground in front of the pump station suggested that the killer could have dragged Jessica's body from a car and dragged it across the ground. Jessica's clothes were intact except for one shoe. Police could not find it in her pocket or in the surrounding area. The only clue found at the crime scene was tire marks on the ground. Police could not be sure that they belonged to the killer's car, but they took pictures of them. Medical experts performed an autopsy and determined that Jessica died from strangulation based on marks on her face and neck. It appeared that the killer did it with his bare hands. A hamburger was also found in her stomach, consumed less than an hour before her death. Her mother said she had not given Jessica anything of the sort that day, leading police to believe the food had been provided to her by the killer. Experts also found no signs of sexual assault, leaving the killer's motive unclear. Police initially suspected Jessica's parents because neither had a solid alibi for the time of her disappearance. Jessica's mother claimed that she was packing her belongings in the apartment, while her father went shopping. However, both had the opportunity to commit the crime, theoretically. Police were trying to figure out how the killer had taken Jessica out of the complex's courtyard without anyone noticing or without her calling for help. This led them to suspect that the killer may have known the victim and that she had left voluntarily. Another factor that supported this theory was the killer's tone during the 911 call. Although experts tried to erase the recording, they still noticed sadness and regret in the killer's voice, as if he truly regretted his actions. The killer's actions when calling 911 spoke volumes. It is possible that the killer did this for the thrill of toying with the police and manipulating the investigation, or that he truly regretted his actions and wanted to somehow alleviate that feeling. However, upon closer examination, investigators are inclined to the second option: that the killer truly regretted his actions. The police checked Jessica's father's car and found an important detail in the trunk. It was a roll of black garbage bags similar to the one in which the victim's body was found. However, after analysis, experts determined that this bag was not similar to the other bags in the father's car. Therefore, Jessica's father was eliminated as a suspect and investigators turned their attention to other people. Forensic experts studied the victim's clothes and body for clues. They found several important traces. There was a large amount of dog hair on the victim's body, which was very strange because Jessica's family did not own dogs. This suggested that the dog might belong to the killer. They also found human hair on the girl's body, which belonged to an unidentified white male. However, it took experts a few days to extract the man's DNA profile. 2 types of strange fibers were also found on the victim's clothing. After analysis, experts concluded that one type of fiber could have come from the car seat cover and the other from the carpet. This further supported the theory that the victim had been killed elsewhere and taken to the water station by car. Experts attempted to identify the breed of the dog from the hairs on Jessica's clothing using an FBI database. This database contains microscopic photographs of hairs from many different dog breeds and has proven useful in criminal cases. The process of identifying the breed of the dog is done by comparing the hairs to samples from the database and eliminating each breed one by one. They eventually concluded that the hair on the victim's clothes came from a Shar-Pei. This suggested that the killer may have owned such a dog and that the hair had gotten on Jessica's clothes while she was in the killer's car or at their home. Investigators developed a preliminary theory that the killer may have lured Jessica into his car, taken her to McDonald's for a hamburger, then taken her home and killed her. Meanwhile, experts were also trying to improve the phone call recording. However, this was a challenging task. To solve this problem, detectives sought help from NASA. NASA has advanced tools for improving recordings, originally designed to improve recordings from space. They agreed to help and provided the police with a higher quality recording. Experts needed a voice sample from the suspect to compare with the call recording and determine a match. Because detectives suspected that the killer might know Jessica, they decided to play the recording of the call to her mother. Jessica's mother listened to the recording and said that the voice sounded familiar, but she couldn't remember who it belonged to. However, after listening to the recording a second time, Jessica's mother recognized the voice as that of a neighbor who lived in the same complex. She added information to detectives that the man often walked a Shar-Pei in the yard. Police quickly identified the man as James Crow, 35. During the initial investigation, investigators interviewed him along with other neighbors. He said that he saw Jessica in the yard while walking her dog. They talked for a while, and then he left. Detectives looked into his background and discovered that James had no criminal record. He lives with his wife, a nurse, and is currently unemployed, spending most of his time walking the streets with a Shar-Pei named Pumpkin. The detectives realized that James's voice and the fact that he owned a dog of the same breed were not enough to arrest him. So they obtained a search warrant for his car. During the search, they discovered 2 troubling clues. Under the front passenger seat, they found an empty Happy Meal bag, which was suspicious since Jessica had eaten a hamburger. Experts also noticed that his car had brand new tires, as if they had barely been used. The police discovered that James had replaced the tires on the day of Jessica's murder, even though his previous tires were not very old and could have lasted for several more years. James claimed to have left the old tires at a car repair shop, which was unusual since they were not old at all. The police went to the service center to investigate. When they arrived, only one of James's tires was left. They compared its tread pattern to those found near the body. However, the results showed that they did not match. Detectives were not 100% certain that the tire tracks on the ground were left by the killer's car, as it was possible that the tire tracks were from a maintenance vehicle that regularly visited the area. Police searched James's apartment and found a box containing rolls of trash bags that matched the bags found on the victim's body. Although not direct evidence, detectives decided to investigate whether there was any way to determine if the bags collected at the scene and at James's home came from the same manufacturer. However, identifying these bags was difficult because they had no distinct markings, and there were hundreds of similar manufacturers. To address this challenge, detectives contacted Roberts, who was in charge of quality control at a bag manufacturing company. Roberts was able to identify the factory that produced the bags found in James's apartment through the code on the cardboard box containing the rolls. This product was manufactured at a facility in Virginia. Experts discovered that small amounts of iron or titanium were present in the bag's composition depending on their color. Since the materials are constantly changing during the manufacturing process, the ratio of plastic to iron or titanium actually changes daily. Detectives decided to take bags from James's apartment and the crime scene to measure the ratio of elements in the plastic using high-intensity X-rays. This gave them a very accurate ratio. Careful analysis showed that the ratio of iron to titanium in both plastic bags was the same, which suggested that they were manufactured on the same day and even in the same batch. The process of manufacturing garbage bags often leaves a small amount of microscopic debris on the machine, which is normal. However, when the plastic sheets are cut into bags, this debris forms small streaks that can be seen with the naked eye. Each roll of bags will have a unique pattern made up of these streaks. The pattern on each bag was created by particles of debris moving down the conveyor belt, which were then replaced by new particles. As a result, the same pattern would be retained over several hundred feet of fabric. This suggests that the two bags were not only produced in the same batch but also within a few hours of each other. When comparing the bags from the suspect's apartment in the crime scene, experts found that the lines on them matched remarkably well. Furthermore, after production, the bags were rolled into a bundle by a machine, but the machine often did this unevenly. Without close observation, these deviations were barely noticeable, making the rolls appear smooth. When examining the edges of the bags, there were small folds and wrinkles that formed a unique pattern similar to streaks. Experts compared and found that the pattern on the bags from James's apartment matched exactly the pattern on the bags at the crime scene. This meant that with a high probability, the bag from the crime scene had been taken from James' apartment. In addition, forensic analysts compared fibers found on Jessica's clothing with those from the carpet in James' apartment and the seat cover of his car. The results showed that both samples matched. Furthermore, an audio expert compared the recording of the 911 call with James' voice sample and concluded that they matched. Although the experts had collected a significant amount of evidence, the detectives still faced the major problem that all the evidence collected was circumstantial. However, the police were confident of James's involvement in Jessica's murder and decided to arrest him. Since James continued to deny his guilt, the case went to trial. The prosecution presented their report on how the crime occurred. James spent a lot of time outside with his dog, and all the local kids knew him well. They often played with Pumpkin, James' dog, and therefore, they trusted him. Jessica was no exception, and this trust may have led to her becoming a victim. The police provided an explanation of what happened on the day Jessica went missing. At that time, James was walking his dog and saw her sitting alone on a bench. He approached her, started chatting, and then invited her to McDonald's to buy her a hamburger. Jessica knew James quite well, so she agreed. According to the police, on that day, James noticed Jessica sitting alone on a bench while he was walking his dog and started chatting with her. He offered to take her to McDonald's, promising to buy her a hamburger, and Jessica agreed because she knew him well. After eating at the restaurant, he may have taken her back to the apartment complex and invited her to his home. He may have asked her to play with Pumpkin. The presence of carpet fibers from his living room on Jessica's clothes suggests she was there on the day of her death. According to the investigation, James may have intended to attack Jessica, but something went wrong. Based on the autopsy results, the perpetrator not only strangled her with his bare hands but also pressed his palms against her face. This may be evidence that she tried to scream, causing the perpetrator to panic and attack. After Jessica's death, James placed her body in a garbage bag and put it in his car to transport it to a disposal site without arousing suspicion. James drove a few miles to a nearby water station, where he left Jessica's body. He then returned to his house, perhaps after stopping at a gas station to make a phone call. During the preliminary hearing, James' attorneys attempted to dismiss all available evidence, arguing that there was no solid evidence to prove their client's guilt. However, in capital cases, the standard of proof is much higher. In James's case, he had a very good chance of avoiding the death penalty. Based on these facts, a plea deal was proposed to James. Under the deal, James would admit to second-degree murder and receive a 40-year prison sentence without the possibility of parole, thereby avoiding the death penalty. In the summer of 1998, 2 years after the murder, James agreed to the deal. Although he was not required to disclose details of the crime, James mentioned that part of his decision was to spare Jessica's family the long ordeal of a trial. The prosecution believed James had shown remorse, as demonstrated by his 911 call. However, the purpose of this call remains unclear. The only plausible explanation is that James genuinely wanted to reduce his guilt for such a serious crime. Jessica's parents were unhappy with the deal because they wanted their daughter's killer to receive the death penalty. They were also disappointed that James refused to confess to the crime. What was even more disappointing was that James did not serve his entire prison sentence due to poor health. He died in November 2011 at the age of 49, taking the secret of Jessica's murder with him. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jasmine Kaur. Jasmine Kaur, an Indian girl, was born on September 14, 1999. She is the eldest daughter of Rashel Kaur. Jasmine later had 2 younger twin brothers named German and Suku. When Jasmine was 6 years old, her father Rashel Kaur passed away. The family had to face many difficulties to overcome this pain. In 2017, Jasmine was 18 years old and decided to start a new journey. She came to Australia with her relatives to seek new opportunities. Jasmine's uncle, who lived in Adelaide with his wife and daughter, moved in with them. Because of her love of learning and desire to help others, Jasmine enrolled at the University of South Australia. After completing her exams, she enrolled in a nursing program. Apart from studying, Jasmine also takes on the responsibility of cooking for her family. She cooks very well. Jasmine has proven herself to be a responsible and diligent woman. Jasmine grew up in a good educational environment. She always kept in touch with her family, especially her mother and close relatives, sharing details of her daily life. To gain practical experience, Jasmine took a job at a nursing home in the suburbs of Adelaide before completing her medical studies. At the same time, a young man named Tarakjot Singh, born in 1999 in a village in the state of Punjab, India. Tarakjot had a younger brother named Mohan Singh. Tarakjot's father often resolved conflicts in the family in a very brutal way. So the atmosphere in Tarakjot's house was often very tense and made both brothers feel scared. Tarakjot is known for his kindness and success, always willing to help people around him. At school, he was an excellent student. In 2016, when Tarakjot finished his studies, his grandparents tried to save a small amount of money to help him move to Australia. Finally, Tarakjot moved to the beautiful city of Adelaide. Tarakjot passed the English test, a necessary requirement for admission to the University of South Australia. At that time, he was faced with many choices about his direction and field of study. In the end, he decided to pursue information technology and aimed to get a bachelor's degree. In addition to studying, Tarakjot also had to work to support himself. Tarakjot tried many different jobs, mainly related to caring for the elderly. His colleagues loved and respected him, and employers appreciated his honesty and kindness. Over time, Tariq Jat achieved much success. Eventually, he saved up enough money to buy his own apartment on the outskirts of the city. There, Tariq Jat befriended a young man named Edvin. In 2018, Jasmine and Tariq Jat met for the first time. Tariq Jat and Jasmine were colleagues at their part-time job. Their relationship quickly developed into love. Tariq Jat he identified Jasmine as the person he wanted to build a family life with. However, as time passed, Tariq Jat gradually became jealous. He began to suspect Jasmine. He asked Jasmine to report her activities in detail, controlled her every move, and became jealous when she met friends after work. Tariq Jat became too controlling in his relationship with Jasmine. Tariq Jat kept calling and making baseless accusations. Jasmine felt that she could not bear this kind of life, so Jasmine confided in her mother about these problems. The mother knew and did not approve of their relationship. Tariq Jat remained unchanged and believed that his thinking was correct. Tariq Jat bought a ring to propose to Jasmine in October 2020, although he felt that Tariq Jat was jealous and controlling. Jasmine still accepted his proposal. Jasmine began to feel insecure when Tariq Jat unexpectedly appeared at her workplace. Although Jasmine was very happy to have just experienced the feeling of being proposed to, Jasmine began to doubt Tariq Jat's actions. Realizing that the relationship was negatively affecting her mental and emotional health, Jasmine decided to end the relationship. On January 4, 2021, Jasmine informed Tariq Jat that they had to break up. However, Tariq Jat threatened her that if she left him, he would end his life. The next day, Jasmine saw Tariq Jat watching her from the window during break time, which made her increasingly worried about her safety. Jasmine spoke to Tariq Jat and he again begged her to stay, but she was determined to break up. At this point, Tariq Jat began threatening to harm himself and insisted that Jasmine would be responsible for everything that happened to him. That same night, Jasmine learned that he had taken a large amount of sleeping pills. Jasmine immediately contacted a neighbor of Tariq Jat's in the apartment building, who took Tariq Jat to the hospital. At the hospital, Tariq Jat wrote a letter claiming that he had committed suicide because Jasmine had decided to break up with him, as her family forbade their relationship. The next morning, January 6, 2021, a psychiatrist examined Tariq Jat but found no signs of mental illness. After being discharged from the hospital, Tariq Jat went to Jasmine's house. Tariq Jat said that he needed to talk to Jasmine about an important matter. And Tariq Jat tried to convince Tariq Jat to come back to him. However, this attempt failed again when Jasmine refused. In desperation, Tariq Jat threatened to make public a private video of them to Jasmine's family. Faced with Jasmine's indifference, Tariq Jat eventually sent the video to her mother. Shocked, Jasmine's mother Harpreet Kaur contacted her daughter. Harpreet was furious when she received the video. Tariq Jat then went to Jasmine's workplace the next day. Tariq Jat stood by his car and patiently waited for Jasmine to leave work. Although Jasmine ignored him and left, Tariq Jat followed her in his car, but suddenly stopped, letting Jasmine go home. However, that night, Jasmine could not sleep well. The pressure from Tariq Jat increased and he kept threatening to share her private video with more people if she did not return to him immediately. January 28, 2021, Jasmine could not bear it anymore. She officially reported Tariq Jat's harassment to the police. The police recorded every detail of their relationship. Due to the seriousness of the case, the police conducted an investigation and met Tariq Jat on February 9 to find out the situation. A few days later, Tariq Jat attempted suicide again but was fortunately discovered by a neighbor in time. In the hospital, he explained that he could not face the breakup and asked to be discharged. His request was accepted and he was discharged. However, after being discharged, Tariq Jat began taking medication prescribed by a doctor to treat depression, anxiety, and agitation. But at the same time, thoughts of harming Jasmine became stronger in his mind. On March 4, 2021, Tariq Jat collected information about the locations of most of the surveillance cameras in Adelaide. The next day, Tariq Jat used another phone and left it at home to create an alibi. To avoid detection, Tariq Jat borrowed a neighbor's blue Jeep. On the same day, Tariq Jat went to a hardware store to buy necessary items, including gloves, cable ties, and a shovel. However, Tariq Jat did not know that his every move was monitored and recorded by the store's surveillance camera. Tariq Jat then drove to Jasmine's workplace and waited for her to finish work at around 10 p.m. When she stepped out onto a deserted street, Tariq Jat suddenly attacked, grabbed Jasmine's arm and dragged her into the car. Tariq Jat covered Jasmine's mouth and eyes, tied her hands and feet and drove to a deserted location. He then put her in the boot of the car and continued driving to another city, nearly 400 kilometers away from Adelaide. Along the entire route, from 10:30 p.m. to 3:30 a.m., 5 city surveillance cameras recorded him using the car. When he reached a deserted location, Tariq Jat got out of the car and began digging a shallow grave near the road. Then Tariq Jat opened the trunk of the car and tried to stab Jasmine in the throat with a knife, causing minor injuries. Next, Tariq Jat pushed Jasmine into the grave and began burying her alive. All of this happened in the early hours of March 6. After burying Jasmine, Tariq Jat got back into the car and drove away. Along the way, he discarded Jasmine's belongings along with the remaining rope, tape, and other items. He also discarded his gloves and hood at a location known as the Death Rock. That same day, Jasmine's family became worried when she did not return home. When she failed to show up for work, with no news of Jasmine, her relatives contacted the police and filed the missing person report. During the investigation into Jasmine's disappearance, police reviewed surveillance footage from Jasmine's workplace and discovered surveillance video from the night before showing a man near the building who had been driving toward another city for most of the morning. In an effort to identify the suspect, police issued a public appeal for anyone with information about a man in his 20s who had been in contact with Jasmine or nearby in the days before she went missing. On March 7th, police met with Tariq Jat to question him about previous police reports of stalking. Tariq Jat initially denied any involvement in Jasmine's disappearance. However, he later told police that he and Jasmine had argued and she had attempted suicide. Tariq Jat claimed that Jasmine died after she passed out and he buried her in a remote location. Tariq Jat was later arrested and led police to the place where he had buried Jasmine. Jasmine's body was found under 30 centimeters of sand. Jasmine's hands were tied behind her back, her legs were tied with cable ties, and her eyes and mouth were covered. The cut on Jasmine's throat was only a superficial wound. An autopsy was performed. During interrogation, inconsistencies in Tariq Jat's testimony led to his arrest. The autopsy revealed that Jasmine was alive when she was buried and that the cause of death was lack of air. These findings shed light on the horrific nature of the case. On March 8, 2021, Tariq Jat was charged with murder and remanded in pretrial detention. Tariq Jat's first appearance in the Supreme Court was scheduled for March 2022. However, Tariq Jat fell ill. Instead, Tariq Jat's lawyer appeared and pleaded not guilty. The trial was adjourned until February 6, 2023. On February 6, 2023, Tariq Jat publicly admitted in the Adelaide Supreme Court that he had kidnapped Jasmine with the intention of killing her. 5 months later, on July 5, 2023, in the Supreme Court of South Australia, the judge sentenced Tariq Jat to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 22 years and 10 months. Tariq Jat could be eligible for parole after this period. However, if released, the defendant would have to leave the country. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rebecca Gould. Rebecca Gould was born on April 28, 1982, in the small town of Melbourne, Kansas, USA, to parents who were going through a divorce. Rebecca, along with her 3 sisters, was raised by her mother but still maintained a relationship with her father. The Gould sisters have a close relationship. They shared a difficult childhood which brought them closer together. Of the sisters, Rebecca and her youngest sister, Danielle, are the closest. In search of a better life and the opportunity to pursue a university education, Rebecca decided to leave her hometown and move to Fayetteville, Arkansas. There, she enrolled in a community college and worked part-time. Danielle also moved to Fayetteville to live with her sister. She helped Rebecca take care of the family and pursue her dream of earning a university degree. One day, during a trip back to her hometown, Rebecca met Casey, whom she noticed and felt something different about. They started dating and gradually fell in love. Although they lived far apart, she and Casey shared beautiful moments together. The relationship between Rebecca and Casey grew stronger. On the morning of September 20th, 2004, Rebecca was scheduled to go to Melbourne to pick Casey up from work at a fast food restaurant. After buying coffee and sandwiches, she decided to go back to the mobile home and take a nap before returning to Fayetteville. Meanwhile, Danielle was at Casey's house waiting for Rebecca to pick her up. Rebecca and Danielle had planned for Rebecca to pick Danielle up at noon. However, Danielle tried calling and texting Rebecca but was unable to reach her sister. Danielle then decided to call Rebecca's friends but still did not receive any news. Danielle became increasingly worried. Danielle decided to go to the police station to report Rebecca missing. The police began investigating Rebecca's disappearance by questioning potential witnesses. The first person they chose to question was Casey, the last person to see Rebecca alive. The detectives went to the restaurant where Casey worked and asked him about Rebecca. Casey said that he had slept over at a friend's house and went straight to work the next morning without seeing Rebecca as usual. He assumed Rebecca had left town with Danielle some time ago. Even though Casey had an alibi, the police still felt suspicious of him. They found it strange that he had left his dog alone at home to spend the night at a friend's house. Furthermore, why would he decide to sleep over at a friend's house the night before his girlfriend left? This was one inconsistency in Casey's story that the police noticed. The police thoroughly searched the mobile home where Casey lived and where Rebecca was last seen. They detected a lingering smell of bleach, apparently used to cover up some sort of incident. Rebecca's belongings were still in place, but the bed was in disarray and the sheets were rumpled. One of them showed blood stains. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood was Rebecca's. Casey immediately became a suspect. However, he had a solid alibi. Several witnesses had seen Rebecca personally driving him to work on Monday morning, and from 8:30 to 4:30, Casey was consistently present at the restaurant. The investigation hit a dead end until a call from a passerby. A week later, a passerby discovered the body of a young girl, brutally mutilated and dumped at the bottom of a shallow ravine outside the city. Police searched the area thoroughly for traces and physical evidence. It was not difficult to identify the murdered girl as Rebecca Gould. She was wearing the same t-shirt and underwear she had been last seen in alive. An autopsy later revealed that her death had occurred about 7 days earlier, on the same Monday, September 20th, when Casey had spent the night at a friend's house. Investigators found signs of brutal beatings on Rebecca's body, including multiple bruises, a broken nose, and a fractured skull. Of particular note were 2 blunt force injuries to the head. These were clearly fatal. The shape of these injuries matched the shape of the missing leg from the piano in Casey's mobile home. Police believed it could have been used as a murder weapon, but they were unable to find it. The details of Rebecca's autopsy revealed the horrific brutality of her killer. In addition to the injuries to her head and neck, she also showed signs of strangulation. A broken hyoid bone indicated a prolonged and brutal strangulation. At the same time, there were no signs of resistance or self-defense, which suggested that the attacker may have been someone she knew and who attacked her from behind. The lack of signs of sexual violence also suggested that rape was not the motive for the murder. Detectives continued to investigate Casey, Rebecca's boyfriend. Several witnesses recalled that Rebecca had talked about wanting to break up with Casey because she was fed up with his constant arguments and controlling behavior. Casey's excessive possessiveness became apparent, especially after Rebecca moved to another city to study. However, Casey's alibi forced the police to look for other leads and suspects. Over time, numerous people connected to Rebecca were investigated, but to no avail. The murder of Rebecca Gould went cold. But in the late 2010s, a surprising breakthrough occurred. A podcast series dedicated to Rebecca's murder caught the attention of a man who claimed to have valuable information about the case. The anonymous witness spoke of a confession he had heard, in which he said he had worked with Casey, the victim's boyfriend, years earlier. At one point, after a few drinks, Casey blurted out that he had killed Rebecca. The witness said that Casey confessed to the crime when he was drunk. However, what was suspicious was that the witness had remained silent for many years and only spoke up when his relationship with Casey became strained. Investigators initially viewed the witness's testimony with skepticism. They suspected that the man's testimony was just a way to get revenge and frame Casey. However, they could not dismiss the testimony either. They decided to continue investigating and look for more evidence. After more than a month of investigation, the detectives still had not found enough evidence to charge Casey. However, they felt that the solution was somewhere nearby. They decided to focus on people related to Casey. Particular attention was paid to William Miller, Casey's cousin, who had arrived in town before the murders. At first, William seemed like a minor character, but as the detectives reconstructed the events, his role in the case began to become clearer. William had left the United States after the murder and moved to the Philippines. This made the detectives suspicious. However, since the Philippines did not have an extradition treaty with the United States, interrogating William became impossible. The detectives could only hope that William would return to the United States and come to their attention. Meanwhile, they found some information on social media. William had joined the discussion group about the case and started commenting on posts. He described the area where the mutilated body was found with surprising accuracy. William's behavior raised suspicions. The detectives felt that they were getting closer to solving the case, but they still needed to find more evidence to be able to charge William. Why would someone who had lived on the other side of the world for years suddenly become so absorbed in the details of a tragedy that happened so long ago? Moreover, William's accurate description of the details of the case is almost astonishing. William Miller found his way back to the United States 16 years after Rebecca Gould's disappearance. Investigators finally had the opportunity to ask him some important questions. The police had previously tried to contact him because of a tip from the community. They suspected that he might have a connection to Rebecca. Investigators began by asking him about his life, especially his time in the Philippines. William made no secret of the fact that he was wealthy. He owned a spacious farm with a family and animals. During the conversation, he also talked about his relationship with Casey. He denied seeing Casey the night before Rebecca disappeared, but he also accidentally revealed that he witnessed an argument between Casey and Rebecca. Investigators felt that he had important information that he could not share because of legal restrictions. William reluctantly added that he never saw Rebecca again, dead or alive. This statement became an important clue for the police, as they realized that information about Rebecca's death had not been made public, making William's knowledge suspicious. Investigators decided to employ a trick to test William. They brought photos of William's car taken in 2004 into the interrogation room and claimed that there was blood on the gas pedal, matching Rebecca Gould's. Upon hearing this, William became nervous and began to fumble his testimony. He gave several implausible versions of events, including seeing a stranger in a white van near Casey's mobile home and accidentally witnessing a robbery. These bizarre stories only reinforced the impression that William had something to hide. Finally, William announced he was ready to tell the whole truth. He recounted that on the morning of September 20th, 2004, he had gone hunting and stopped by Casey's mobile home to borrow a cell phone. Rebecca, who was inside, sensed no danger and opened the door for William. William suddenly lunged at Rebecca, knocking her to the ground, and began beating her with his fists and random objects. He took a broken piano leg and repeatedly struck the defenseless Rebecca over the head. To ensure she was dead, William strangled her with a pair of tights he found in the room. After killing Rebecca, William wrapped her body in a suitcase, mopped the bloody floor, stuffed the blankets and sheets in the washing machine, and turned the mattress upside down to hide the evidence. He took Rebecca's body out of town and threw it into the nearest ravine. Investigators listening to this bizarre confession were haunted by a simple question: why? What drove this seemingly respectable family man to commit such a terrible crime? William swore he had no intention of raping Rebecca and that there was no romantic or sexual relationship between them. He had not robbed her and had no personal grievances or grudges. The reason, he said, was a spontaneous rage at the weakness he sensed in Rebecca. Rebecca had not said anything offensive or done anything wrong. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. For years, William Miller had boasted about his crimes and taunted the police. Joining the online group became a gain for him, a chance to prove his superiority over the law once again. However, was Rebecca Gould William's only victim? This became the central question for the detectives. In order to find out more information, they resorted to a ruse. They thought this could help them discover the truth. When they told William that they knew of other murders with a method similar to Rebecca's, William began to cry and beg for mercy. He then revealed a series of new details about his crimes, which horrified the detectives. According to William, he was not just a lone killer but a true maniac. At least 5 lives were lost at his hands. The victims were mostly young women, including prostitutes and hitchhikers. William would pick them up on the highway, lure them to deserted places, and then brutally murder them. William did not rape these women. Instead, he derived pleasure from the killing process itself. He watched the life fade from the eyes of his captives, savoring their terror and despair. Then, he would strangle them with their clothes. The detectives listened attentively to William's confession, feeling horrified. They realized that they had encountered a living serial killer, which could help them solve many cases. However, the detectives also questioned the authenticity of William's confession. To verify the information, they asked William to provide more details about the victims and where they were buried. William provided some information, but it was not detailed enough. He gave some descriptions of the victims, but did not provide specific information about the locations or dates of the murders. In the end, the detectives relied on a rough map that William had marked with some of the possible locations where the victims' remains might be found. William's testimony was still valuable. The detectives knew that they had months, if not years, of hard work and careful examination ahead. They would have to search for missing bodies, compare DNA, and identify the victims. The most important thing was that William would eventually go to prison and never be able to hurt anyone again. William had revealed too many details that only the killer would know. His testimony matched the autopsy results and the circumstances of the crime scene perfectly. In November 2022, more than 5 years after William Miller was arrested, the case finally came to a close. William was charged with the premeditated murder of Rebecca Gould. However, investigators did not have enough evidence to charge him with other crimes. The court decided to focus on the 16-year-old murder case. The prosecutor argued that a life sentence was appropriate for William. They believed that he was no longer a human being but a killer who posed a direct threat to society. The prosecutor believed that if William were released, even for a day, he would surely commit more crimes. In contrast to the prosecutor, William's lawyers emphasized that he was not responsible for his actions because of his mental illness. They urged the jury to sympathize with their client and allow him to be treated in an appropriate psychiatric facility. In the end, the court convicted William Miller of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole in 25 years. If William were released, he would be 72 years old. The verdict shocked the people of Melbourne. Many protested that the sentence was too lenient. In their view, a person who committed such a crime did not deserve parole. Some argued that the investigation had watered down the crime and weakened the case to avoid affecting the clearance rate. Ultimately, William's conviction automatically cleared Casey, who many townspeople considered the real killer. Despite the skepticism and outrage, the fact remains that one of the most famous and mysterious murders in Melbourne's history has finally been solved. The real killer, a serial killer and psychopath, was imprisoned, not for life, but long enough to protect society from further victims. While not all the mysteries were solved, Rebecca's family finally knew the truth. They could begin to heal their emotional wounds. Months have passed since William Miller's arrest, and life in Melbourne is slowly returning to normal. Rebecca Gould's family is trying to come to terms with their grief. Her mother has found the strength to visit her daughter's grave for the first time in years. Her father has also opened her childhood toys and photo albums, which have been hidden in the attic for a long time. Rebecca's sisters have grown up and are trying to make up for lost time, calling each other regularly to share their grief. Rebecca's best friend, Casey, has decided to stay in Melbourne. He feels he must prove that he can build a new life despite the pain and loss he has experienced. He rarely visits the old mobile home, which holds so many painful memories. But when he gets the chance, he brings white roses to the door, Rebecca's favorite flower. William Miller, who caused pain to Rebecca's family, seems to have accepted his fate in prison. He behaves quietly, trying not to attract undue attention. He willingly communicates with a psychiatrist and takes prescribed medication. However, from time to time, a strange smile flashes across his face, as if reflecting something dark that has long been hidden under a mask of kindness. This story is a testament to the inevitability of justice. Sometimes it seems that evil is winning and criminals are getting away with it, but in reality, it is not. Sooner or later, punishment comes to all those who have crossed the line of humanity, and when it does, there is no turning back, only bitterness, loneliness, and the burden of guilt to carry to the end. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Lauren Heike. Lauren Heike was born on November 20th, 1993, in Seattle, Washington, to a well-off family. Her father, Jeff, owned a plumbing manufacturing business, and her mother, Lana, worked in real estate. Lauren was close to her older brother, Ryan. She attended Central Kitsap High School in Silverdale, Washington. After graduating, Lauren moved to Phoenix and enrolled at the Gary Manuel Lita Institute to study cosmetology and skin care. Lauren took great care of herself and had a good understanding of cosmetics. Lauren started her career at 18 years old and achieved significant success. She initially spent 5 years, from 2015 onwards, working as a customer support representative. She then became a leading manager at Benefit, a renowned cosmetics company. Next, she worked as a cosmetologist at a beauty salon for 9 months. In October 2020, Lauren got a job as a manager at an aesthetic medicine center. Additionally, she had aspirations to pursue a career in real estate, following in her mother's footsteps. At the time of the tragedy, Lauren was working full-time as an instructor at a golf club. Lauren was a confident and responsible individual who thrived in multiple areas, including the beauty industry, sports, and real estate. She made her physical health a top priority and led a healthy, active lifestyle. With a strong support system of friends and family, which allowed her to make the most of her leisure time by doing things she loved, such as traveling, going on hikes, and spending time with others. One of her favorite pastimes was walking alone, immersed in music and nature, savoring the fresh air, silence, and tranquility. Her preferred route was a secluded path in the northern part of Phoenix, close to her apartment. Lauren's parents worried about her walking alone in empty areas, but she felt sure she was safe. Lauren began each day with a consistent routine, waking up, drinking coffee, chatting with loved ones and friends, and embarking on her daily walk. She believes these things help her start her day on a positive note. However, Lauren has no idea that her gullible and carefree nature will put her in danger. On April 28, 2023, Lauren started her morning routine as usual. She had coffee, chatted with family and friends on the phone, and went for a walk in a quiet area near her apartment in northern Phoenix. The scenic trail took around 15 to 30 minutes to walk one way. Lauren left her apartment at around 10:30 a.m. Surveillance cameras last captured her walking calmly on the trail at 10:52 a.m., wearing a pink sports top, black leggings, and sneakers, with only her phone and keys on her. After that, she was not seen again. Lauren was expected at work at 11:30 a.m. but failed to show up, which was unusual for someone so responsible. Her colleagues tried calling her, but her phone was turned off. This worried Lauren's friends, who shared messages on social media and called each other to find information about Lauren's location. However, no one had any news, and Lauren had not been seen after leaving her apartment that morning. At about 1 p.m., Lauren's worried parents went to her apartment because they couldn't get in touch with her. They thought maybe she wasn't feeling well and that's why she didn't go to work. But Lauren wasn't there either. All her belongings were still in place, the doors were locked, and nothing suggested there had been a break-in or a struggle. It looked like she had gone out for a walk and just hadn't come back. After that, Lauren's relatives immediately filed a missing person report with the police. The authorities reacted swiftly and initiated a search, but unfortunately, they did not get any results. The park where Lauren went for a walk was almost deserted. If someone had been passing by when the attack occurred, the tragedy might have been prevented. However, that was not the case. Lauren was last seen walking alone towards the park, and then she disappeared, no longer responding to calls. Throughout the day, the police and volunteers thoroughly searched the surrounding area, the park, and looked for potential witnesses. They meticulously combed every corner and every bush but found nothing. Lauren's loved ones held on to the hope that she might have simply wandered off, got delayed, or visited friends in another part of the city. Lauren's relatives kept calling and texting her, but still didn't know where she was. As the hours passed, their hopes dwindled, and their fear for Lauren's life grew. Her parents, brother, and friends were beside themselves with worry. The following morning, April 29th, was like a terrible nightmare. At around 11 o'clock, the worst happened. A woman walking her dog stumbled upon Lauren's body. She recognized Lauren because she often walked her dog on that route and had seen Lauren before. The dog sensed something was wrong, and the woman saw Lauren's bloody body. She immediately called the police. Police arrived instantly at the scene to a horrific sight. Lauren's body was found 3 meters off the trail, concealed in a thicket with numerous stab wounds. She lay face up with outstretched arms, her clothes torn, and blood was everywhere. Experts began working immediately, with the forensic medical examiner determining that Lauren died on April 28 at approximately 11 a.m. due to blood loss from deep knife wounds. A total of 15 stab wounds were found on Lauren's body, likely inflicted with a pocket knife. The wound in her back area was fatal. The nature of the wounds indicated that the attack and murder lasted for some time, as they were in different parts of her body, varying in depth and shape. The injuries on Lauren's hands showed she had resisted, with deep cuts on both sides of her hands from trying to deflect the sharp knife. Police realized Lauren fought to the end, but her attacker was aggressive and strong. The attack was unexpected, and scratches on her back, shoulders, and torn clothing indicated the suspect attacked from behind, knocking her down and stabbing her with a knife. He then turned her over and continued to strike. At the crime scene, investigators found a clear footprint from a size 42 to 43 sneaker, likely belonging to the attacker. The area showed signs of a struggle, with Lauren attempting to crawl away and hide in nearby bushes. However, she was unable to escape, and bloodstains were found stretching several meters from the scene, ending near her body. It appeared that Lauren fought for her life and called for help, but unfortunately, she was alone in the deserted park at that early hour with no one nearby to assist her. Near the body, a barbed wire fence was discovered, which Lauren seemed to have desperately tried to climb over. Torn clothing and blood were found on the wire, suggesting that her attempt to overcome the fence resulted in the numerous scratches and abrasions on her body. Lauren's phone and house keys were found nearby, having fallen from her pockets during the struggle. Her phone was broken, with the last calls made on the evening of April 27th, indicating that no one had heard from her for over a day. Further examination of the area revealed a bloody pocket knife among the branches a few meters from the crime scene, providing another crucial piece of evidence. Experts quickly identified the object as the likely murder weapon. Further analysis of the blade and handle uncovered fingerprints and DNA traces from an unidentified male. Investigators also collected hair and skin cells from the killer at the crime scene. Lauren's body, along with all physical evidence, was promptly sent for forensic examination. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed the surveillance camera footage from the park. They found that one camera captured Lauren entering the park at 10:52, walking alone and listening to music on her headphones, without anything seeming out of the ordinary. However, just 1 minute later, a tall, thin man in dark clothing appeared on the recording, quickly passing by the camera as if attempting to conceal his face. Despite the man's efforts to hide, experts were able to make out that he was a young African-American male wearing a cap. Notably, his height, build, skin color, and clothing matched the description of the individual whose traces were discovered at the crime scene. Another camera, positioned at the park exit, recorded the same man rushing out from around the corner at 10:59, looking around frantically. He then tried to climb over the fence but got his clothes caught, ultimately jumping over and losing his cap in the process. The investigation gained its first lead from records showing the suspect disappearing in an unknown direction. Although the perpetrator's identity couldn't be immediately established, the police now had an accurate description and distinguishing features to work with. Notably, the unknown man appeared in the park around the same time Lauren was murdered, according to preliminary findings. The cameras captured footage of the killer before and after the crime. A detailed analysis of the footage revealed more information. The suspect moved with purpose, glancing around as if fearful of being seen. He appeared in the park about 30 to 40 seconds after Lauren did, suggesting he was following her. After committing the crime, the perpetrator fled the scene in the opposite direction of the park entrance, scaling a fence to escape quickly. This behavior supports the theory that the murder was premeditated and possibly not his first offense. The killer acted swiftly and boldly, attempting to avoid leaving evidence behind. However, In their haste, they made mistakes that allowed them to be partially captured on camera. Despite being shown footage from the cameras, Lauren's parents and friends were unable to identify the man in the video. The tragedy left everyone shocked and deeply saddened. Lauren's loved ones don't understand why someone could so cruelly take the life-kind and energetic girl. Lauren had no enemies, was not involved in any conflicts, and did not owe anyone money. Additionally, she did not own anything that was worth a significant amount. Her lifestyle is extremely healthy. As a result, the possibilities of revenge or robbery were quickly ruled out. A week after the murder, a press conference was held where police officers shared the evidence they had gathered and appealed to the public for help in identifying the suspect. Lauren's father, clearly distraught, pleaded with anyone who had information to come forward help and assist law enforcement. In response, Lauren's relatives offered a substantial reward for any information that could help identify the killer. The case sent shockwaves throughout the city, prompting thousands of people to take action by sharing information on social media, organizing search parties, and volunteering. Meanwhile, investigators continued to analyze physical evidence. Forensic experts carefully examined DNA, fingerprints, and other biological evidence in a laboratory. Eventually, they got a break in the case. The suspect's genetic profile matched a record in the police database, which identified Zion William Teasley, a 22-year-old African American with a history of crime. Detectives promptly began to investigate Teasley's background. Their inquiry revealed that Teasley was raised in a troubled home. His parents struggled with addiction. Teasley had a criminal record from a young age, with offenses including theft, public disorder, and intimidation. In 2020, he was convicted of committing several armed robberies. As a result, Teasley spent almost a year incarcerated, but his sentence was reduced due to positive behavior, allowing him to be released early. Teasley's most recent arrest occurred in January 2023 for a knife attack on a bystander, but the charges were dropped when the victim withdrew their statement, resulting in Teasley receiving a suspended sentence. At the time of Lauren's murder, the suspect was under police supervision, requiring him to regularly report to the precinct. His last check-in occurred on April 27th, the day before the tragic incident in the park. Upon learning this, detectives started devising a plan to apprehend Teasley, placing him under 24-hour surveillance. It was discovered that Teasley was unemployed and spent most of his time at home, occasionally visiting the store or meeting with suspicious individuals. Having obtained an arrest warrant, police visited Teasley's apartment, breaking down the door to gain entry. However, they found no one inside. The search uncovered a bucket of chlorine, gloves, and rags, indicating Teasley's likely intention to eliminate evidence. Teasley's room contained a packed suitcase and a new passport in a different name, along with bus tickets to Canada, suggesting a plan to escape the country. The investigation led detectives to believe Teasley was aware of the search and aimed to evade justice. A massive search operation was launched. Information about Teasley was sent to all states, and border agents were instructed to apprehend the suspect. Surveillance systems have been enhanced at railway stations, airports, and highways. By tracking calls from Teasley's phone and analyzing cell tower signals, detectives sought to pinpoint his location. Concurrently, they collected more evidence, including accounts from witnesses who spotted Teasley following Lauren the day before the murder. Another witness stated that they saw him in the same park 2 days prior to the tragic incident. A thorough investigation into Teasley's past revealed a disturbing pattern of violent behavior towards women. Just a month prior to Lauren's murder, he was detained for harassing a woman at a nightclub. Furthermore, a former girlfriend had previously filed a complaint against him for physical abuse, although the case was ultimately dropped due to insufficient evidence. It is clear that Teasley was an extremely unstable and aggressive man with a deep hatred of women, whom he considered inferior. Teasley's social media posts were discovered, where he used derogatory language towards women. Photographs were found featuring knives that bore a striking resemblance to the murder weapon at the scene. Authorities suggested that Lauren may have been a random victim of Teasley's violent tendencies. Lauren's family were shocked and couldn't understand why someone would be so heartless and cruel. Their daughter had simply gone for a walk and was brutally murdered for no reason. Lauren's father made a heartfelt plea to the public, begging them not to seek revenge themselves. He wants people to let the police handle the situation and punish the perpetrators through the law, instead of using mob violence. After a 3-day search, Teasley was apprehended in an abandoned garage on the city's outskirts. During the arrest, he resisted and injured a police officer. During questioning, Teasley was uncooperative, claiming he had committed no crime and had never seen Lauren before. He later denied being in the park that day, but fell silent when shown surveillance footage, and he requested a lawyer. The prosecutor promptly charged Teasley with intentional murder and kidnapping, citing substantial evidence, surveillance videos, Lauren's belongings found in a garage, a knife, DNA, and fingerprints from the crime scene. The court ordered Teasley to be held without bail. Teasley's trial began on June 5, 2023, and was one of the most high-profile cases in state history, drawing widespread national attention. Journalists and members of the public who were concerned about the issue assembled in front of the courthouse. Everyone in the courtroom was to catch a glimpse of the person responsible for the horrific murder. Teasley, the defendant, was led in wearing handcuffs and an orange prison robe, his expression eerily indifferent. In stark contrast, Lauren's family was overcome with heartache. Her mother sobbed uncontrollably, while her father glared at Teasley with anger and hatred. The prosecutor gave a powerful and emotional speech, portraying Teasley as a ruthless killer who posed a significant threat to society. He stressed how brutally the crime was committed and the overwhelming evidence against Teasley. Prosecutors described Teasley as a psychopath who enjoyed inflicting pain on women, driven by a deep-seated hatred for them. Conversely, Teasley's defense attorney sought to prove his client's innocence. He challenged the evidence, arguing that it was possible another individual was responsible for Lauren's death. The defense urged the jury to remain impartial, to focus solely on the facts and not be swayed by public opinion or emotions. Teasley is currently charged with first-degree murder. In December 2023, the Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office requested the death penalty, the most severe punishment allowed by Arizona law for such a serious crime. The Phoenix Police Department has completed their investigation, and the suspect will face prosecution. However, Teasley maintains his innocence despite the charges. He remains in custody without bail. The trial is expected to take place in October 2025 and will be one of the most high-profile cases in Arizona history. Lauren's tragic death shocked the nation and devastated her loved ones. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Kody Sepich. Kody, a 22-year-old woman, was known for her outgoing personality, intelligence, and vibrancy. Born and raised in Carlsbad, New Mexico, she was the eldest of 3 siblings. Kody is Jean's special daughter, admired for her intelligence and charming personality that attracts everyone. Kody graduated from New Mexico State University with a business degree and had plans to start her MBA program in the fall. To support herself, she worked as a waitress at a local Mexican restaurant. During her time at the university, Kody met Joe Bischoff and they quickly formed a close bond. Over time, their friendship blossomed into romance. Kody shared her happiness with her mother, Jean, expressing her hopes of building a life with Joe. Months later, Kody's dream became a possibility when Joe proposed to her with a diamond ring. However, after Kody and Joe graduated in the summer of 2003, they faced challenges in their relationship. Kody decided to stay at the university to continue her studies, while Joe returned to his parents' home in Gallup, New Mexico, a small city about 350 miles away from Las Cruces. This distance put it difficult on their relationship. Despite this, Kody and Joe made an effort to stay in touch and meet whenever possible. On Labor Day weekend in 2003, Joe visited Las Cruces and spent time with Kody. However, their weekend together turned into a tragedy. On Saturday, August 30th, 2003, Kody had fun with Joe and their friends, going from bar to bar and eventually ending up at a local house party. After the party, Kody vanished. The following day, August 31st, 2003, Kody's mother, Jean, received a phone call. This changed her life forever. Recounting that day, Jean described it as follows. She had been preparing for a Labor Day weekend cookout with her family and friends when the phone rang at 2:15 afternoon, bringing news that would shatter her world. The caller asked, "Have you talked to Kody today?" The phone call was from Kody's roommate, Veronica, who had been searching for her and had already contacted Kody's friends and local hospitals without finding any sign of her. Jean was informed by Veronica that Kody had left the party by herself the night before. Veronica and Joe had fallen asleep at the party location, assuming Kody had returned home. However, when they woke up in the morning, Kody was nowhere to be found. Her family immediately contacted the police to report her disappearance. Around the same time, a passerby discovered a half-naked woman's body near a desert landfill. Although there was no identification nearby, police officers arriving at the scene concluded that the body had likely been there for less than 24 hours. It was clear to them that the victim's death was no accident. The victim, estimated to be between 20 and 25 years old, had been stripped of clothing from the waist down. Examination of the body revealed self-defense wounds on her arms, indicating she had put up a fight and scratched her attacker. The police found skin particles under her fingernails, providing them with the perpetrator's DNA. Strangulation marks were visible on her neck, initially suggesting it as the cause of death. The investigators concluded that the young woman did not die at the remote desert landfill where her body was found, as there were no signs of a struggle near the scene. Instead, it appears her body was moved there in an attempt to delay the search. A disturbing detect on the victim's body revealed burn marks on her arms and back, suggesting that the perpetrator had tried to dispose of the body or destroy evidence by setting it on fire. The police quickly made a connection between Kody's disappearance and the discovery of a young woman's body. Kody's father was called to the morgue to identify the body. Kody's mother, Jean, said that the young woman's body was their daughter's. Jean struggled to put into words the immense pain and agony they were enduring. As if they were falling into a deep, dark abyss with no way out, leaving them with no sense of tomorrow or any remaining joy. Kody's father shared that when they lifted the sheet, revealing his daughter's bruised and disfigured face, he was deeply saddened. The residents of once peaceful Las Cruces were shaken by the horrific incident. The police were determined to find the perpetrator as soon as possible, aware that there was no guarantee the person wouldn't commit another crime. The investigation into Kody's case began with a thorough examination of her final hours. The police aimed to piece together her last moments, where she was, who she was with, what she was doing, and if she had any conflicts or enemies. Since the party was about a mile from Kody's home, investigating whether she made it back safely was a priority. To start, the investigators spoke with Veronica, Kody's roommate, and Joe. The detectives found it suspicious that these two stayed at the party while Kody left alone in the middle of the night. However, Joe was uncooperative, stating that Kody had departed, leaving her purse, phone, and keys behind. The investigation team then focused on retracing Kody's route home, going door to door to interview residents, hoping for any leads. Unfortunately, no one saw or heard anything that could help the investigation. Investigations revealed a crucial detect. Kody likely returned to her house but failed to enter it. Notably, she had left her keys behind. Upon searching the house, the investigator found Kody's shoes beside her bedroom window. It appears she attempted to enter through the window but was ambushed. Footprints in the gravel nearby supported this theory. A violent struggle ensued, but sadly, Kody's attacker overpowered her. Further investigation led the authorities to believe that the perpetrator disposed of Kody's body at a desert landfill, attempting to conceal evidence by setting it on fire. The central question remained: was the attacker a stranger or someone Kody trusted? With around 40 party attendees, there was a strong possibility the killer was an acquaintance. Could the perpetrator have been Kody's boyfriend, Joe? This led investigators to interview partygoers, unearthing a critical detail Joe did not mention. Several witnesses reported that Kody saw Joe kissing another girl, which sparked a heated argument between the couple. In her state of anger, Kody hastily left the party alone, forgetting her purse. When questioned by police, Joe neglected to disclose this crucial information. He also did not inform Kody's parents about the incident, despite their curiosity about why Kody had left the party by herself. The investigators questioned Joe again about his whereabouts on the night of Kody's murder. They had discovered that he and Kody had a fight earlier that evening after she saw him kissing another girl. Joe acknowledged the argument and explained that he followed Kody home but did not enter her house. He claimed he saw her bedroom light was off and assumed she was asleep, so he returned to the party. However, the new information sparked suspicion because it indicated Joe was not at the party when the attack occurred, and none of the partygoers could confirm when he returned. During further interviews with party attendees, investigators found another peculiar detail. When he returned to the party, Joe called Kody. Then Joe heard the phone ring, and he realized that she had left her phone at the party. Despite this, Joe continued to phone her until morning. Was he trying to create an alibi or pretend to be concerned about Kody's well-being? Investigators asked Joe to clarify his actions, but he refused to cooperate with them any. Kody loved Joe very much, but he didn't even come to her funeral, which aroused even greater suspicion. Investigators decided to test his DNA. They had collected DNA evidence from Kody's body, mostly under her fingernails, where they found human skin cells. The sample's DNA all belonged to one person. The police needed to compare his DNA to the DNA found on Kody's body. But there were problems with that. Joe was out of town, and his lawyer informed the investigators that Joe refused to provide a DNA sample. The police suspected that Joe was involved in Kody's death, given his suspicious behavior. To confirm that, they needed to find a legitimate way to obtain Joe DNA. However, this took time, and in the meantime, they searched other possible explanations. They investigated similar cases to determine if Kody was the victim of a serial offender. The DNA found on her body was matched against a national database, but no matches were found. The investigators decided to revisit the party where Kody was last seen. They identified the male attendees and asked for their DNA samples, which they all willingly provided. However, none of their DNA matched the samples found on Kody's body, leading the investigators to focus on Joe again. Notably, Joe was the only person who had refused to provide a DNA sample, but the investigators found an alternative method to obtain Joe's DNA sample. Kody and Joe spent time in her bedroom before attending the party, engaging in intimate contact. The police visited Kody's house and collected the bed sheet, hoping to find Joe's DNA. Their efforts were successful, and the lab discovered a sample of male DNA on the sheet. However, the DNA did not match the sample found on Kody's body, indicating that Joe was not the suspect. This discovery raised further questions about Joe's behavior, as he had refused to cooperate with the police despite not being involved in the attack on his girlfriend. The police sent the test results to Joe's lawyer, informing them that he had been cleared as a suspect. Joe agreed to talk to the police again and provided a DNA sample. The results supported the initial findings. Joe was not involved in Kody's crime. When questioned about his initial reluctance to cooperate, Joe explained that he and Kody had been intimate before the party, and he was worried that his DNA would be found on her body. The mystery surrounding Joe's behavior on the night of Kody's death remained unsolved for the police and Kody's family. After Joe was cleared as a suspect, the police explored alternative theories. Party attendees informed investigators that Kody was wearing rings, including the one given by Joe, but none were found on her body when it was discovered. The police believed that the killer removed the rings from Kody's fingers. They searched local pawn shops but did not find Kody's rings. The discovery of specific tire tracks near where Kody's body was found provided another new lead. Experts identified the tire brand and model, and the manufacturer informed the police that these tires were most commonly used on pickup trucks. Unfortunately, this information did not help identify the culprit, and the case hit a dead end. A year after Kody's attack, a similar crime occurred in Wisconsin. A girl in Green Bay was assaulted, set on fire, and left for dead. However, the victim somehow managed to survive by pretending to be dead. Once her attackers left, she put out the flames and sought help at a nearby residence. The survivor described her attackers to the police as two Hispanic men. The police created sketches based on her description and released them to the public. A local farmer recognized the men in the sketches as his workers, Gregorio Morales and Juan. One of them had relatives in Los Cruces, and he often visited them. Both men were arrested. As a result, the police were able to apprehend both suspects. Initially, investigators thought they had identified Kody's attacker, but the DNA test results contradicted this conclusion. The sample's DNA did not match the DNA found on Kody's body. Although Gregorio Morales and Juan were later convicted of assaulting the girl in Green Bay, they were not linked to Kody's case. Gregorio Morales and Juan were sentenced to 50 and 70 years in prison, respectively. The only leads the police had to go on were the tire tracks from the crime scene and the DNA samples of the perpetrator. Kody's family was hopeful that these DNA samples would allow the police to identify the person who took their daughter's life. Unfortunately, there were complications with the DNA evidence. At that time, police were not mandated to collect DNA samples from individuals when they were arrested. Kody's mother was shocked and devastated by the loss of her daughter to a violent man. The family's main concern is to find out the identity of the perpetrator, understand the motive behind this terrible crime, and most importantly, that the killer is held accountable and no longer poses a threat to others. The lead detective gives an update on the case, saying that aside from DNA evidence, they currently lack concrete other leads to investigate further. Kody had fought hard for her life, which resulted in her killer's blood and skin being found under her fingernails. This had allowed investigators to create a DNA profile. Detectives uploaded the DNA into CODIS, the National Forensic Database, and then checked it against the offender database on a weekly basis to see if there was a match. Although they had the killer's identity through the DNA profile, the police needed to find the matching individual in their database to make an identification. Kody's family felt hopeful, they knowing the police would eventually match the DNA to a suspect, bringing them closer to justice for their daughter's tragic death. Kody's murder case saw a major breakthrough 3.5 years later. On December 18, 2006, the lab found a DNA sample that matched the DNA found on Kody's body. The perpetrator was identified as 26 years old Gabriel Avila, a married man of 2. He has a very long previous criminal record and had been released from prison shortly before Kody's death. On November 13, 2003, Gabriel Avila was apprehended by authorities after breaking into an apartment. Armed with a knife, Fortunately, two young women inside the apartment managed to evade his attack by quickly locking themselves in the bathroom and dialing 911 for emergency assistance. He was convicted of aggravated burglary in March 2004, but released on bond. A flaw in the system caused a significant delay, and it wasn't until 3.5 years later that investigators were able to link him to Kody's death. Gabriel Avila managed to evade police for nearly a year. Then, he being apprehended in November 2004, based on a tip. He received a 9-year prison sentence. While in prison, Gabriel Avila provided a DNA sample, but it took 2 more years to be tested. Once the results showed a partial match with the DNA from Kody's crime scene, investigators quickly jumped into action. They found the truck Gabriel Avila used to dispose of Kody's body and discovered a ring belonging to her in the center console. In 2006, after finding a ring belonging to Kody in Gabriel Avila's truck, detectives investigating Kody's case visited his in prison. Gabriel Avila confessed to the crime, explaining that while his wife was away, he was in the area to buy illicit substances. He claimed that he approached Kody and offered her a ride, which she declined. Later that night, Gabriel Avila encountered Kody again in front of her house. He stopped and offered her assistance, and that Kody told him she was locked out without her purse. Gabriel Avila attempted to help her, but he then attacked and began undressing Kody. What followed was a violent assault. After the assault, Gabriel Avila panicked and decided to strangle Kody out of fear that she would identify him. Despite Kody putting up a brief struggle, Gabriel Avila restrained her, unable to let go, ultimately leading to her death. Gabriel Avila claimed he put Kody in his pickup truck and drove her to a desert landfill, where he left her body on the ground. He attempted to burn the body, thinking it would eliminate evidence. But this effort was unsuccessful. A new DNA sample from Gabriel Avila matched the DNA found at the scene. When authorities found DNA on Kody's body in 2003, her parents were optimistic that it would help quickly find a suspect. However, at the time, there was a significant gap in the law. In New Mexico and most states, it was illegal to take DNA when someone was arrested. DNA could only be collected from individuals who had been convicted of a crime and sent to prison. This meant that the DNA on Kody's body couldn't initially be matched. The trial of Gabriel Avila, who was accused of the crime, began in 2017. Gabriel Avila apologized to Kody's family during the trial. His lawyer asked the judge to consider showing leniency, emphasizing that Gabriel Avila was genuinely remorseful for his actions. In contrast, District Attorney Susana Martinez countered that it took Gabriel Avila more than 3 years to confess to the crimes, and he only did so after detectives presented him with DNA evidence. At the sentencing, David, Kody's father, pleaded with the judge to hand down a severe punishment. He stressed that because Kody would never have another opportunity in life, it was only fair that her killer should not be given a chance to be free again. In May 2007, Gabriel Avila was found guilty and sentenced to 69 years in prison. After serving 30 years, he will be eligible for parole around 2043. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Athena Strand. Athena Strand was born on May 25, 2015 in the small town of Duncan, Oklahoma, USA. Her parents divorced and her father moved to Texas while Athena still lived with her mother in Oklahoma. Despite living far apart, her father kept in touch and visited her whenever possible. Sometimes her mother would bring Athena to see her father so they could spend time together. Both her parents remarried later and Athena had 2 younger sisters. Athena was a cheerful, sociable child. She loved to play and spend a lot of time outdoors. In the winter of 2022, when Athena was 7 years old, she temporarily left Oklahoma to live with her father in Texas until the New Year holidays ended. During this time, Athena attended a local elementary school. Her father's house was located in a remote rural area, surrounded by forests and vast fields. Here, Athena had a great time exploring nature with her father and also built a good relationship with his new wife, Elizabeth. On November 30th, Athena returned home from school at around 4:15 p.m., just like every other day. She was home alone with her mother, Elizabeth, because her father and grandfather had gone hunting. That evening, Athena had an argument with Elizabeth. Athena finally felt upset and decided to go to her own room. Meanwhile, Elizabeth went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. After about 20 minutes, Elizabeth went to Athena's room to call her to dinner, but she was gone. She started searching the whole house but couldn't find Athena anywhere. Elizabeth called a relative of her husband who lived nearby. Although Athena often visited the relatives, this time the relative said that she was missing. Next, Elizabeth called her husband and told him about the situation. Her husband immediately asked her to contact the police and return home immediately. When she got home, Elizabeth called the 911 emergency number at around 6:40. Only 14 minutes later, the police arrived at her house. She explained the situation to the police and said that she thought Athena might have left home because of an argument between mother and child. Initially, the police seemed suspicious of Elizabeth because she had reported the child missing 40 minutes after discovering the incident. However, after listening to her description of the search around the house and contacting family members, they concluded that she might be telling the truth. The police immediately began searching the surrounding area. Although it was already dark, they still organized a search force within a radius of several kilometers around the house. They believed that the child might have gotten lost in the dark and needed urgent help. They focused on searching the entire area, including the woods and fields. Police also considered the possibility of kidnapping but found no evidence to support this theory. There was no sign of an intruder in the house and no strange noises or screams that night. Police received support from family and town residents in their efforts to find the missing Athena. The girl's mother quickly arrived at the scene after learning of her daughter's disappearance. But the results were still inconclusive as no trace of Athena was found. The search became more difficult, as the area around the house was quite difficult to access, especially at night. Therefore, the police continued the search at 7 a.m. the next morning with more police officers joining in. As news of the disappearance spread, hundreds of volunteers volunteered to join the search effort. Some came on horses and ATVs, while police used drones and helicopters equipped with thermal cameras to search for Athena. By the end of the day, Athena had still not been found. Police were concerned for her safety because of the cold weather at the beginning of winter. Although Texas is a small southern state, the temperature had dropped to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Since the girl was wearing thin clothes, it would be really difficult to endure such weather. On the third day, the search continued, and the police expanded the area to search for Athena. The police became increasingly suspicious that Athena had left the house on her own. During these days, they searched for miles in all directions, but they could not find the girl. The police identified the people who were near Athena's house that night. However, Athena's house was located in a special location, far from the main road, and there were no surveillance cameras in the area. However, they quickly got some important clues. A courier service had delivered to Athena's house that evening. The police contacted the courier company and learned that the delivery to the address was entrusted to an outside contractor. They then contacted that contractor and determined that the truck had arrived at Athena's house. Each of these trucks was equipped with surveillance cameras. So the police asked for footage from November 30th. After rewinding the time the truck arrived at the house, the police saw the driver dragging a girl who looked like Athena into the car. The police quickly identified the driver as Tanner Hearer, 31, and the police went to his address. Shortly thereafter, the man was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and taken in for questioning. As soon as the police mentioned the video evidence, Tanner began to speak. He explained that he had actually delivered a package to Athena's house that evening. While backing up the truck, he heard a crash and went to check what had happened. There, he saw the girl lying on the ground and realized that he had accidentally hit her with his car. As he approached, Tanner noticed that the girl was not seriously injured. She was conscious and spoke to him calmly. The girl said her name was Athena. He started to feel scared. He decided to take her into the truck and try to figure out how to solve the problem. The girl continued to talk to him and said that she would tell her father about this, and Tanner became more and more worried. He didn't know what to do with the situation, because he knew that if she told an adult about the incident, he could get into legal trouble. According to Tanner, he could not think of a better way than to kill her. He thought the best way would be to break her neck, but he could not do it. He then strangled Athena to death with his hands. He hid Athena's body in a nearby river. Tanner gave the police the exact location where he left Athena. So the police went there and found Athena's body. The murder shocked not only her family but also thousands of people across the country. All major media outlets reported the case and many were horrified by the brutality. After the body was found, Tanner was charged with kidnapping and murder. While waiting for the medical examiner's report, the police scrutinized Tanner's identity, trying to better understand his motives. Tanner's account of the events did not seem plausible. According to Tanner, he lightly hit the girl with his heart valve, causing no serious injuries to her. However, Tanner was so depressed that he immediately decided to kill her, thinking that beating a child would cost him his job. Tanner's story seems very strange. Police found out that this man was engaged and had a 1-year-old child. In addition to delivering goods, he occasionally worked as an Uber driver. Tanner's daily life, he participated in performing in a band at several cafes in the nearby city of Fort Worth. On social media, he often posted photos with his son, snapshots during music performances, and other moments of his daily life. These images do not show that he was a cruel person. There is no information about his previous criminal record before his arrest. Police also found no indication that he might be a dangerous criminal. Meanwhile, Athena's parents filed a lawsuit against FedEx and the contracting company, accusing them of allowing Tanner to work. They called for higher standards for employee screening to prevent such crimes in the future. Police investigators said the package Tanner delivered that evening was a Christmas gift Athena's parents had ordered for her. It was a Barbie doll she had long wanted. However, when the results of the medical examination were released, the case became more complicated. Experts said Athena died within an hour of being kidnapped. Her body had suffered various degrees of injury and the primary cause of her death was asphyxiation. Police then outlined a series of events that could have led to the incident. After an argument with her mother, Athena decided to go outside and stand in the yard. At this time, Tanner arrived to make a delivery and found her alone. According to this theory, he saw an opportunity to satisfy his lust. The area around Athena's house was quite isolated and the police believe that Tanner may have tricked or deliberately attacked Athena to get her into the car without encountering any resistance. It is still unclear what happened next. There are two main possibilities that seem most plausible. First, Tanner may have planned to take Athena out of the house to carry out his evil intentions, but the girl started screaming or tried to escape. Fearing discovery, Tanner killed the girl and dumped her body in the river. Second, Tanner may have committed some kind of harassment against Athena that did not involve direct contact. In this case, medical experts would not find evidence of sexual assault. To learn more, police spent weeks digging into Tanner's past. They spoke to his relatives, friends, and acquaintances, looking for any signs that he might have been involved in other criminal activities. There was a major breakthrough in the investigation. The police found several people who said they had been assaulted by Tanner when they were children. However, the identities of these people have not been released to protect the investigation. One of Tanner's victims went public with her story of being assaulted by him when she was 16. She shared her story on social media in an attempt to gain attention. Surprisingly, Tanner faced no consequences for his actions and was not even considered a suspect for a long time. Sadly, the victim wrote that no one believed her during those years. However, after Tanner killed Athena, these allegations received more attention, exposing Tanner's true nature. Now Tanner will also face separate trials for 4 sexual assaults involving minors. In preparation for the trial, the government announced that they would seek the death penalty. Tanner himself has hired a lawyer to advise him to withdraw his confession and declare his innocence, but this is unlikely to help him avoid punishment, as the police have video footage from the truck as well as Tanner's testimony about the exact location of the body. We can only watch the trial unfold and wait for more details to become public. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Shanynthia Gardner. Shanynthia Gardner was born in the late 80s in Memphis, Tennessee, USA. Not much is known about her childhood except that she was the daughter of Eleanor Snodgrass, who lived in a cozy wooden house in Madison, Alabama. Shaninthea's childhood and youth passed as normal as any other girl of her time. Shanynthia was a young girl with curly brown hair, slim and beautiful. She was always surrounded by loyal friends and showed outstanding talent. Shanynthia was full of creative spirit, had a unique talent for songwriting and a passion for music. She expressed herself through singing and attracted the attention of the local people. In addition to singing, Shanynthia was fascinated by the world of fashion and photography. She had the ability to turn everyday moments into works of art in front of the camera. Despite her diverse interests, Shanynthia was a charitable woman who attended church regularly and took good care of her family. Everything in Shaninthea's life seemed to be preordained and promised a bright future. Shanynthia was 14 when she met Daryl Clayton through mutual friends. They quickly became friends and their relationship became more serious after graduating from high school, becoming an official couple. They spent a lot of time together and were considered serious and stable young people. However, their crime records had some questionable details. Both had minor crimes such as traffic violations and disorderly conduct on the street. In 2008, Daryl was charged with assaulting a woman, even though the act was unintentional. He faced severe punishment, but all charges were later dropped. Shanynthia and Daryl were not officially married but lived together. In 2008, they had a son named Dee. Shanynthia became a caring mother, taking care of not only her son but also Daryl's 2 children from a previous relationship. Daryl's mother, Sonia Clayton, considered Shanynthia a family member, not just her son's lover. However, their relationship did not last. Although the reason is unknown, they kept in touch after the breakup. For Daryl, Shanynthia was still a good wife and a caring mother. When her son Dee was only 2 years old, Shanynthia was involved in a small incident, possibly a parking ticket or a small argument. This was insignificant compared to what would happen in her future. Marrying Martin Gardner opened a new chapter in Shaninthia's life. This union brought joy and stability to her life. Shanynthia won Martin over with her kindness and love for her children, which was reflected in her gentleness and intelligence. Their love story developed rapidly. In September 2013, they decided to live together and moved into an apartment complex in southeast Shelby County. The wedding marked the beginning of a new phase in their lives. After the celebration, they had their first son, Telone, followed by baby Saya in 2014. Soon after, their 2 daughters Savi and Yazzie were born, bringing happiness to their family. In total, Martin and Shanynthia have 4 children together and 1 child from Shaninthia's previous relationship. As a young mother, her children have always been her #1 priority. She enjoys working part-time at Children's Hospital and is actively involved in a fundraising organization to help children. It is her passion and purpose in life. On a normal Friday, July 1, 2016. Around noon, Shanynthia called her husband, Martin. Her voice was completely calm. She told him that she was going to take the children to the movies. There was no indication that something terrible was going to happen that day. At that moment, they was having a quiet conversation when a sudden and confusing event occurred. Shanynthia suddenly changed her attitude and took a kitchen knife into the living room. She attacked her 6-month-old daughter, Yazzie, leaving her defenseless and in a terrible situation. Yazzie's life was cut short abruptly by the person she loved and was closest to. Dee, the eldest child, was only 7 years old and witnessed this horrific scene. He was too young to understand what was happening, but he knew that he needed to act to save his younger brother and sister. Panicked and desperate, Dee ran out of the house. Shanynthia continued to hold the knife and chase her son. She rushed after Dee, but he screamed loudly, attracting the attention of the neighbors. Several neighbors heard his screams and rushed outside to see what was happening. They witnessed a horrifying scene that they could not forget in their minds. When they realized that Dee was being chased, but Shanynthia stopped. However, the horror was not over yet. Shanynthia returned to the house, where Savi and Talon were waiting for her. Distraught, she went upstairs to the bedroom where the children were lying. Those were the last moments of their innocent lives. Meanwhile, those who witnessed the horrifying scene quickly called the emergency services, asking for help and rescuing Dee and his siblings. None of them could have imagined the tragic consequences that awaited this peaceful street. The sheriff arrived at the scene and witnessed a strange scene inside the house at 7449 Southern Hill Road. They found Shanynthia covered in blood and her 4 children lying motionless, lifeless. The scene left everyone in shock. Shanynthia sat there, holding her cell phone and slowly dialing her husband, Martin. Her voice was soft but cold as she confessed to killing her children. The tragedy that had happened in their lives was a horrific event that would forever be remembered in this quiet neighborhood. By the time the prosecutor's office and the special forces arrived at the scene, everything was over. There was only an eerie silence in the house that had once been home to the Happy Gardner family. Blood and horror were everywhere. Investigators found a bloody knife and witnessed the horrific incident. Chaplains came to help and were shocked by what had happened. Professionals were also ready to assist Dee, who was suffering from a horror that required immediate intervention. Shanynthia was arrested and held without bail. Her trial is scheduled for July 5th. The horrific events unfolding in Shanynthia Gardner's life have left society unable to remain indifferent. Although she has been portrayed as a monster, Shanynthia is still a mother and partner who radiates love, care, and joy. Her co-worker, Michelle Jaiman, has defended Shanynthia on social media and spoken out about the injustice of the charges. Michelle also emphasized the importance of considering postpartum depression in cases like this. Dr. Joel Rissman, a psychiatrist at the University of Tennessee Medical Center, confirmed that infanticide by mothers is rare and often accompanied by mental illness. He also pointed to the lack of mental health funding in the state, which leaves many families without the support they need. Dr. Diane Barnes, an expert in postpartum psychology and health, explained the difference between postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. She emphasized that the 2 conditions are completely different, with different symptoms. In Shaninthia's case, Dr. Diane doubts that women with postpartum depression would commit such acts. Instead, she favors the possibility that Shanynthia suffered from psychosis. The investigation into Shanynthia Gardner's case has been fraught with difficulties. Her defense attorney, Craig Morton, has chosen not to comment on the case to the media in its early stages, saying it is too early to discuss it. On July 5, 2016, Shanynthia did not speak at her trial, appearing only via video. Judge Lambert questioned her, but Shanynthia did not respond. After the trial, she was taken to the Institute of Mental Health. Shanintia's family members were present in court but declined to comment to reporters. Morton's attorney and prosecutor, Jennifer Nichols, plans to file a motion to preserve evidence in the case, including information gathered from social media. In January 2017, Shanynthia was formally charged with 4 counts: aggravated child abuse, aggravated murder with a weapon, aggravated child abuse, and child neglect. The mysterious and chilling investigation continues, leaving the community waiting for justice and answers to many unanswered questions. The hearing was attended by Shaninthia's family members on the day of the tragedy. Sonia, Drill's mother, must have been devastated when she heard the news of the horrific tragedy. She rushed to the scene in a search for her nephew D. Sonia asserted that this action was completely unlike the Shanynthia she knew. Initially, she believed that something supernatural or demonic had caused the tragedy. However, as time passed and the initial shock subsided, Sonia began to consider possible reasons. She theorized that the couple may have been in the process of divorce. Shanynthia, fearful of raising 5 children on her own, may have made the terrifying decision to end it all. However, despite these speculations, Sonia found it hard to believe. To her, the Shanynthia she knew was not the person capable of such a terrible act. Dee's father did not believe Shanynthia was guilty. Although he was not the official guardian, he visited his son regularly after his separation from Shanynthia. However, the last time he saw his son was in November 2014. He noticed that Shanynthia was becoming more extreme in her actions and decisions. All attempts to contact her son failed and he was banned from interfering in her life. Shaninthia's friends and family soon noticed a sudden change in her. She began to show unusual symptoms, from feeling irritable to deep anxiety, paranoia, and panic attacks. Her behavior became erratic and unpredictable, leading many to suspect that she was suffering from postpartum depression. The sudden change in Shaninthia's behavior shocked those around her. She had been a strong, dependable woman who had everything under control. But now, she seemed to have lost her temper, leaving many wondering what had happened. The first signs of trouble appeared in March 2015. Friends and family were puzzled. One day, Shanynthia left work early, picked up her 5 children, and drove off in an unknown direction. Her husband, Martin, thought his wife was just taking the children for a walk and relaxing in the park, as was her usual routine. However, after several hours, Martin was confused and decided to call the police. Shanynthia drove from Memphis to Corinth, 74 miles east, with her 5 children. She did not know anyone there and had no apparent reason for being there. She was later found in the emergency room at St. Francis Hospital, but police did not disclose any details. She had superficial cuts on her neck and wrists, possibly from a suicide attempt, but her children were too young to understand what was happening. After being brought home, Shanynthia began to act strangely. She told her husband Martin that someone had threatened their family, but did not provide any further information. This shocked Martin, who had never had any previous threats. When she was with family and friends, Shanynthia complained about her job and felt bad about it. She then began to say that some of her coworkers wanted to hurt her. Despite the unusual signs, Shanynthia did not exhibit abusive or violent behavior toward her children or others. The wait for trial was long and difficult, with significant delays due to multiple psychiatric evaluations of the defendant. In 2021, the final non-jury trial took place. The defense focused on Shaninthia's mental illness argument. The prosecutor acknowledged her mental condition, but argued that the defendant still had the ability to distinguish right from wrong and was aware of the illegality of her actions. Ultimately, Shelby County Criminal Court Judge James rejected the defense. In December 2021, Shaninthia Gardner was found guilty on all charges against her. In February 2022, Shaninthia, 34, appeared in court to receive her sentence, with her husband Martin present. Judge James sentenced her to life in prison for each count of murder and 15 years for each count of child abuse and neglect. Shaninthia will only be eligible for parole after serving 51 years, including the 5 years she has already served before sentencing. She will be eligible for parole at age 80, about 46 years from now. After the hearing, the prosecutor expressed approval of the sentence, saying it satisfied Martin's desire for justice for his children. Martin also felt relieved to know that Shaninthia would no longer have the opportunity to harm any more children. An evening vigil was held at Sonia family's apartment complex to remember the victims. Sonia stood among a crowd of neighbors, relatives, and police. Attendees held red and white candles, praying for the soul of the deceased. The Baptist minister said this was the first step in healing the community, and everyone could only support the surviving child and his father through this difficult time. Martin did not attend the memorial service because he was too sad. Sonia spoke to the press on his behalf. The leadership of the Children's Hospital where Shaninthia worked also sent condolences. Martin's colleagues set up a social media page to help him arrange the funeral for his 4 children. During the service, Martin spoke about his family and children in an emotional and noble way. His words showed admirable resilience. At the end of his speech, Martin emphasized that he would always remember the happy image of his family, with Shaninthia and the children by his side. This is a precious memory that he will cherish forever. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Micaela Garrecht. Sharon Murch and her husband, Rod Garrecht, had been trying to have a child for 5 years. After numerous visits to doctors and fertility treatments, they were overjoyed when their daughter Micaela Garrecht was born on January 24, 1979, in Oakland, California. Her parents affectionately referred to her as their miracle child due to the difficulties they faced in conceiving her. After that, their family soon welcomed 2 new members, a daughter named Libby and a son named Alex. In 1986, the family relocated to Hayward, where they settled down, established their home, and raised their children. As a child, Micaela was known for being intelligent, lively, and well-behaved. She listened attentively to her parents and followed their advice closely. Sharon was a caring and attentive mother. Sometimes it makes others feel like she's being overprotective of her children. Given the rise in child abductions in California during the 1980s, her caution was understandable. As a result, she always kept her children close to home and ensured they were never far from adult supervision. On Saturday, November 19, 1988, Micaela finished breakfast with her family. Her best friend, 9-year-old Katrina Rodriguez, stopped by to ask if Micaela could accompany her to the local grocery store to buy snacks. Initially, Sharon, Micaela's mother, refused permission. However, Micaela persisted, assuring her mother that they would be safe and return quickly. Eventually, Sharon relented and gave her permission to go with you. As a precaution, Sharon reminded they to be careful. She gave Micaela $5, then the girls eagerly grabbed their scooters and left. Before leaving, Micaela expressed her love for her mother. As Sharon watched them leave, her husband Rod decided to go outside and work on the car. Meanwhile, Sharon headed back inside to clean up the breakfast dishes. Unbeknownst to her, the next few minutes would alter her life forever. Micaela and Katrina eagerly rode their scooters to the Rainbow Market on Mission Boulevard and parked them right outside the store. The girls then entered the market to buy some snacks. They purchased 2 Mountain Dew sodas, 2 beef jerky sticks, and 2 cherry toffees before exiting the store. Engrossed in a conversation about their holiday plans, they completely forgot about their scooters. As they were about to leave the parking lot, they suddenly remembered their scooters were still outside. To their surprise, the scooters was missing. The girls decided to split up and search for it. Micaela spotted the scooter first. It had been moved about 3 parking spaces away and was now standing beside a car. Without hesitation, Micaela rushed over to the scooter and bent down to grab the handlebars. In a rapid and unexpected turn of events, a man leapt from the car and grabbed Micaela around her waist. He then forcefully pushed her into the back seat. Witnessing the shocking scene unfold, Katrina momentarily froze, her eyes fixed on the chaotic scene as her friend struggled to break free from the abductor's grasp. The car sped away from the parking space, accelerating down Mission Boulevard toward Union City. Regaining her composure, Katrina rushed back into the store and alerted the cashier, Rona Ranilan, about the kidnapping. Rona quickly called the local police, and they were quickly present at the crime scene. Additionally, Rona also contacted Katrina's father and told them what had just happened to their daughter. Sharon was doing the dishes at home when she heard a frantic shout from outside. Her husband, Rod, burst through the front door, telling her that Micaela had just been kidnapped outside the Rainbow Market. Along with Katrina's father, they rushed to the store and found police everywhere, questioning customers and staff. Katrina was extremely upset and was allowed to go home with her father. Rod and Sharon stayed behind, hoping to get some information about what had happened. However, as Sharon waited anxiously, she couldn't shake off a growing sense of fear. Sharon recalled a poem written by Micaela. She also remembered an incident from the week before that had left her unsettled. Specifically, Sharon had woken up early one morning to find Micaela sitting at the breakfast table, writing in the early hours. Micaela's mother asked her what she was working on, and Micaela vaguely replied that she was writing a poem. Sharon asking repeatedly what the poem was about. Micaela finally explained that her poem was inspired by the noises she had heard coming from the attic that morning. She had been thinking about people who were kidnapped and being held captive, and her poem was about their experiences. She explained that the poem actually referred to individuals who were being detained against their will, rather than those who had been kidnapped and murdered. Sharon found Micaela's poem to be disturbing and out of character, as her daughter was typically a happy person. In hindsight, Sharon believes that Micaela may have written the poem as a kind of prophecy or premonition. The police were provided with a description of the man who allegedly kidnapped Micaela. Rona, a cashier, told them that the suspect was a white male in his 30s with a mustache. She also reported that he drove a car that was either burgundy or maroon in color, but was unable to provide details about the make or model. According to Rona, the man had parked his car and gotten out, but instead of entering the store, he looked through the window, observing the girls and other customers without entering. She suspected he might be planning to rob the store. A sketch artist created a composite picture, then distributed to local police stations and news outlets. The investigators found the scooter used in the abduction and collected it as evidence. They obtained a handprint from the scooter handle, which was added to their database to identify the kidnapper. But it did not lead to any leads. The day after the kidnapping, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, joined the investigation, they suspecting a relevance between a series of local child kidnappings, but this was ultimately not confirmed. Police soon realized that Katrina could provide more information about the suspect since she was the main witness to the abduction. 2 days after the incident, investigators visited her home. They spoke with her and her parents, and the information she provided shocked them. Her description of the kidnapper greatly differed from the one provided by the store cashier. Katrina described him as a young white male in his early 20s with dirty blonde hair, severe acne scarring, and blue eyes. Katrina vividly recalled the suspect's eyes, describing them to investigators as fox eyes. She explained that despite his look straight at her, but he didn't seem to recognize her. Additionally, she told investigators that the suspect's car was beige or tan in color, box-shaped, and had noticeable body damage. The new description raises concerns as it means the crucial 48 hours to find a suspect has been wasted on finding the wrong person. Investigators reprinted posters with the new suspect's description and redistributed them throughout the area. Armed with this fresh information, they began visiting local sex offenders, inquiring about potential leads. A large number of volunteers joined, going door to door and distributing posters that detailed Micaela's clothing: a white Metro t-shirt, rolled-up blue denim jeans, black Mary Jane shoes, and pearl-colored feather-shaped earrings. After searching the nearby suburbs but finding no sign of Micaela, police expanded their search, include the Garin National Park and Niles Canyon, which are just a short distance from the She home. This decision was prompted by a tip from 3 hikers, who claimed to have found footprints in the forest area, belonging to 1 adult and 1 child. Upon following the tracks, the hikers discovered a blanket and empty fast food containers. A psychological analysis of the kidnapper suggested they would likely take Micaela to a secluded location. To aid in the search, helicopters were equipped with infrared thermal cameras to detect heat signatures in the dense wooded areas. Police officers also combed the area on horseback and on foot, but these efforts did not produce any results. Unfortunately, Micaela and her kidnapper seemed to have vanished without a trace. The search for Micaela made national headlines, and her case was featured on prominent television programs such as Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted. Her photo was also distributed on milk cartons, and the Missing Children's program sent over 50 million mailing cards to homes across the country. These cards included a picture of Micaela, a description of her clothing, and a composite sketch of the kidnapper. San Francisco 49ers quarterback Joe Montana publicly showed his support for the Micaela family and urged the public to come forward with any information. A $70,000 reward was offered for any information related to Micaela's disappearance. Within the first year, the police received over 5,000 tips, the majority of which were unfounded rumors. Despite this, the community remained dedicated to finding Micaela. Sharon conducted her own investigation and found some clues, some taking her as far as Russia, but none produced any results. A significant break in the case occurred between 1991 and 1992, when an inmate in Indiana provided authorities with crucial information regarding Micaela's disappearance. Roger Haggard, who was serving an 11-year sentence for burglary, claimed to have helped a friend bury Micaela's body in a gladiolus field in Union City. At first, the investigators were skeptical and did not think his claims were credible enough to be investigated further. Undeterred, Roger decided to reach out to the media for help. In 1992, he wrote a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, stating that he knew who had kidnapped Micaela and where her body was buried. He offered to lead investigators to the location. Hen investigators brought Roger to California to testify before a grand jury. Roger repeated his earlier claims under oath, promised to lead investigators to Micaela's burial site and the home of her killer. The next day, a team of investigators accompanied Roger to the field where he claimed Micaela's body was buried. After 8 hours of searching, Roger confessed that his claim was false. He explained that his intention was to provide the Micaela family a sense of peace after all these years. This confession had even more serious consequences for Roger. He was charged with perjury and received an additional 6 years prison sentence, along with an order to pay $6,000 in damages to Micaela's family for giving them false hope. This development would not be the only one to shake the investigation. Authorities also kept an eye on another individual, Lawrence Binder, 43, a wastewater treatment plant worker. He appeared to be a normal man, married with a family. However, suspicions were raised when investigators received a tip from East Bay Area parents about his disturbing behavior. These parents claimed that he had been sending gifts and money to young girls in an attempt to befriend them. What's more, some of the letters he wrote were written in reverse, requiring the recipient to use a mirror to decipher their meaning. As investigators dug deeper into Lawrence's past, they found that he drove a distinctive light blue van with the license plate, "Love You." The interior of the van was peculiarly decorated with photos of small children, children's drawings, and biblical verses. Furthermore, Lawrence had a previous arrest record for attempting to lure two young girls into his van, although the charges were eventually dropped. Lawrence often inserted himself into investigations of missing children. For instance, following the 1988 disappearance of Micaela, he reached out to her mother, Sharon. He also contacted Kim Schwartz, the mother of 7-year-old Amber Schwartz, who went missing in June 1988. In both cases, the mothers eventually told the police that they felt uneasy about Lawrence's persistence in contacting them and trying to stay updated on the developments in their daughters' cases. After uncovering a series of unusual circumstances, the investigation led authorities to suspect Lawrence of being involved in a series of child abductions. When Amber went missing, Lawrence wrote to the police predicting the next victim would be a 9-year-old girl. This proved true when Micaela missing. Lawrence further raised suspicions when he sending a Christmas card with a picture of a girl holding up 4 fingers to an FBI profiler. This incident took on a more ominous tone when 4-year-old Amanda Campbell went missing on December 27, 1991. Lawrence was also linked to the disappearance of Eileen Mischelhoff, a 13-year-old girl from Dublin, California. As Lawrence's name became associated with the string of child abductions, he found himself under intense media scrutiny. His unusual behavior and fascination with the cases sparked widespread public interest, leading many people to suspect he was involved. As a result, Lawrence and his family faced harassment and public backlash. However, after Lawrence sued the city of Fairfield for defamation and won, investigators began to reassess his role in the case. It became clear that he was not as involved as initially thought, and many believed he was simply trying to insert himself into the investigation. Despite the mystery surrounding Lawrence, the case remained a complex challenge for investigators. In addition, there is a new suspect, Curtis Dean Anderson. He was arrested in August 2000 and subsequently linked to a series of heinous crimes. After his arrest, Anderson confessed to the 1999 abduction and murder of 7-year-old Ziana Fairchild from Vallejo, California. During a 2007 FBI interview, Anderson made a shocking claim: he had murdered 13 additional women and girls. He also admitted to abducting and killing 7-year-old Amber Schwartz, whom he had seen standing on a street corner. However, Curtis's life ended abruptly on December 9, 2007, when he died due to kidney and liver failure. This untimely death prevented investigators from gathering more information about Curtis's past crimes. Following his confession, investigators looked into Curtis's background and found a coincidence. In 1989, he was pulled over in a brown 1977 Chevy sedan, matched the vehicle description given by a witness named Katrina. Despite Curtis's death, his confession reignited interest in a more notorious case, the kidnapping of Micaela. The renewed investigation brought new attention and generated fresh leads. However, a new development in August 2012 shed more light on the case. Wesley Sherman, one half of the notorious Speed Freaks duo, reached out to the Stockton Record after his accomplice, Loren Herzog, took his own life in January that year. Wesley pointed out that Loren was to bear an uncanny resemblance to the suspect's composite in Micaela's case. The resemblance between Loren and the kidnapper is further confirmed by Katrina's observations, which indicate that Loren shares very similar characteristics to Micaela's kidnapper. Following a lead from Wesley, investigators began excavating a well in Linden, California, where him and Loren was believed to have disposed of Micaela's remains. The excavation uncovered thousands of bone fragments, some likely belonging to Micaela. Although investigators never lost hope of solving the case, the mystery continued to baffle them. It wasn't until 8 years later that a useful clue finally emerged. The circumstances surrounding Micaela's disappearance were horrifying and had a profound impact on the public. However, more shocking revelations were yet to come. On December 21, 2020, the Hayward Police Department and FBI made a significant announcement in the Micaela case, revealing a surprising development. Despite initial suspicions focusing on Loren and Wesley, but then investigators charged 61 years old David Garrick with Micaela's kidnapping and murder. Advances in technology played a crucial role in solving the case, by linking David's fingerprints to those found on Micaela's scooter 32 years earlier, in 1988. David Misch has been charged with the murder of Micaela and is currently in custody at Santa Rita Jail in Alameda County. An examination of David's past reveals a disturbing pattern of crime that dates back to his teenage years. Born on February 19, 1961, in Chicago, Illinois, little is known about David's upbringing. However, by the age of 16, he had already become involved in criminal activities. In 1977, he was convicted of breaking into a house, where he sexually assaulted a maid at knife point. He was arrested and sentenced but was paroled just a year later, in 1978. David's troubles with the law continued. In February 1979, he was arrested for charges of false imprisonment and assault with a deadly weapon, which were later updated to assault with intent to rape. Despite this, he became eligible for parole in September 1981. Years later, in May 1988, David was arrested for burglary at a San Leandro grocery store. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison and 1 year of probation. In November of the same year, he was released from custody after 6 months. However, his luck eventually ran out in December 1988. That year, a tragic incident happened to his longtime friend Margaret Ball, who was 38 years old. She often helped him in times of need, but the nature of their relationship took a drastic turn. Margaret's dead body was discovered by her stepdaughter in a pool of blood, brutally beaten and stabbed. The crime scene was particularly gruesome, with Margaret's front tooth found a few feet away from her body due to the severity of the beating. The police were led to David as the primary suspect after discovering evidence linking him to the crime. He was arrested and eventually convicted of Margaret's murder. While David was already serving time for Margaret's murder, new evidence led to additional charges against him. In 2018, he was sentenced to 18 years to life for Margaret's murder. A DNA analysis later implicated David in 2 murders that occurred in Fremont, California, in 1986. 2 young women, Michelle Xavier, 18, and her best friend, Jennifer Dewey, 20, had gone out to celebrate a family member's birthday dinner on February 2, 1986. After leaving the restaurant, they stopped at a convenience store. However, shortly after midnight, their bodies were found on the side of the road by a motorcyclist. The scene revealed a disturbing and violent crime. The women were stripped naked, they had been stabbed and shot. An autopsy later revealed that they had also been sexually assaulted. The car Michelle was driving was discovered 6 miles away from the crime scene in a grocery store parking lot. Micaela's case was forgotten for many years due to lack of clues and information. However, 32 years later, advances in DNA technology led detectives to a suspect: David Garrick. He is currently serving time, faces additional charges, including 3 counts of murder and 1 count of abduction, which could result in the death penalty. Chief Hayward vowed to continue the search for Micaela's body and remains hopeful that she will be found. Micaela's father, Rod Garrett, traveled over 100 miles to attend a recent press conference. He expressed a sense of relief knowing that the police have caught suspect. The authorities have a suspect to question, and hopefully, this person will provide information about Micaela's whereabouts. Sharon, Micaela's mother, was unable to attend a press conference due to her ongoing battle with metastatic cancer. Police Chief Hayward read a statement on her behalf, which revealed her struggle to accept the reality of her daughter's fate. In the past year, she had to accept the likelihood that Micaela was no longer alive. However, she found comfort in imagining her in a peaceful afterlife, sitting on clouds, walking on golden streets, dancing on hills, and soaring among the stars. Bernie Castillo, the attorney for David, has been vocal about the case and strongly criticizes the investigation methods used to charge his client. He dismisses the evidence as junk science and finds it implausible that a handprint match was suddenly found after 32 years. Bernie believes the police are trying to pin the blame solely on David as a convenient way to close the case. Meanwhile, Katrina, Micaela's close friend and witness to the case, has been carrying guilt over, still remembers the tragic incident that occurred that Saturday morning. She feels that it should have been her, as the scooter that was moved belonged to her. This burden of guilt has caused Katrina to suppress memories of her childhood. In contrast, Sharon, Micaela's mother, dedicated her life to finding her daughter. Initially, she waited anxiously for news at the telephone and later turned to the internet for answers. However, after David was charged with Micaela's murder, Sharon's fight for justice began to fade due to her cancer diagnosis. She eventually passed away in May 2022, finding solace in the fact that she would soon be reunited with her daughter. A new twist has arisen in the complicated case of David, who is currently awaiting trial for his alleged involvement in the kidnapping and murder of Micaela, as well as the murders of Michelle and Jennifer. The search for justice for Micaela has been going on for decades, but may now face a significant obstacle. It seems David, the suspect, might not face the full severity of the punishment for the allegations against him. In contrast, David's defense attorney, Ernie, viewed the news as validation, stating that each case against David relies on questionable forensic tactics. Bernie was not surprised by the decision, as it confirms his long-held belief that the prosecution's case has significant weaknesses. Others, however, disagree with the decision. Chuck Euler, a retired lieutenant who worked on another case involving David, believed he should receive the maximum sentence for his crimes. David is currently awaiting trial for 3 counts of murder and 1 count of kidnapping. His case is closely tied to the mysterious disappearance of Micaela, a story filled with unexpected twists and turns. However, the investigation was marred by an initial case of mistaken identity, leading police to waste valuable time in the first 2 days. As a result, Micaela's family was left searching for answers for decades. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Alison Bonilla. Alison Pamela Bonilla Vasquez was born on November 7, 2001, in Cartago, Costa Rica. She is an only child, living with her mother Yendrai Vasquez. In addition to her mother, her grandparents Ramon and Marjorie, and her aunt Samara also helped raise Alison. Alison's father left the family shortly after her birth. He chose to be with another woman who was pregnant. He did not want to play a role in Alison's life. Only once, when he was diagnosed with lung cancer, did he ask to see his daughter, and Yendrai allowed him to. It is worth noting that his second family did not know about Alison's existence. Alison and her mother, Yendrai, had a particularly close relationship. For Alison, Yendrai was not only a mother but also a father. Therefore, Allison often gave her mother gifts on Father's Day. Their relationship went beyond the typical mother-daughter relationship. Allison felt comfortable sharing everything with Yendrai without fear of being misunderstood or judged. Despite not having a father, Allison did not feel lonely or abandoned. She had a large family and enjoyed spending time with them. She also attended church regularly every Sunday. Relatives described Allison as a kind, outgoing, and friendly girl. In photos, she always looked happy, and there was no sign of sadness or longing in her eyes. Allison had always dreamed of becoming a model. She decided to drop out of 8th grade to focus on makeup classes, thinking that combining the two was too difficult. She did not want to waste time on something that would not help her achieve her goals. After that, Allison started looking for a job to help her mother pay the bills but did not receive any responses from the places she applied. This made her very sad. Her mother, Yendrai, realized that her daughter would have difficulty finding a job due to her limited education, so she encouraged Allison to take evening classes. At age 18, Allison enrolled in Liceo Enrique Geyer, a few miles from home. During this time, she completed a pastry course and began practicing. Allison made delicious cakes and desserts that were loved by everyone in the neighborhood. This helped her find a way to make money from her baking talent. Allison had a boyfriend named Harold Sura Solano who lived in Cachi, a district in the province of Cartago, Costa Rica. Usually, Allison stayed home with her mother in the morning, then met Harold, and then went to evening school at 6 o'clock. She often returned home late by bus. The route from the bus stop to her house was dangerous, dark, and deserted. Therefore, Allison always informed her mother of her location, and sometimes her mother picked her up at the bus stop or halfway. On March 4, 2020, Allison went to her mother's nail salon, then visited her classmate Pal for about 15 minutes. They arrived at school at 6 p.m. and separated because they had different classes. Allison arrived at school and waited in an empty classroom for about 15 minutes before realizing that her classes had been canceled for the day. Instead of going home right away, she decided to visit her aunt who lived near the school. However, her aunt was not home. Allison then decided to go to her boyfriend Harold's house. When she arrived, she learned that Harold was at work but would be back soon. Harold's mother invited Allison inside to wait. When Harold returned, the family had dinner together, talking about a variety of topics and discussing future plans. After dinner, Harold excused himself for a moment, saying that he had urgent business to attend to but would be back soon. At 8:15 p.m., Allison left Harold's house without waiting for him to return. This set off a chain of events that would become nationally known. Harold returned home about 5 minutes later and, seeing that Allison had left, texted her to ask where she was and offered to give her a ride home on his bike. Allison replied immediately that she had already arrived at the bus stop. While waiting for the bus, she texted her friend Pa to ask if Pa's cousin could give her a ride home on his bike. However, Pa's cousin refused because his bike was a special type and not suitable for two people. It is unclear why Allison did not ask her boyfriend for help. She may have been angry with him or did not want to bother him. Allison got off the bus at 8:43 p.m. Her house was about a mile away. Feeling anxious and scared, she texted her mother to pick her up. At 8:45 p.m., Allison texted her boyfriend and mother that two suspicious men had gotten out of a car and were following her. She decided to run home to avoid them. The road Allison was on was dangerous, poorly lit, and had few people. There was only one security camera there, which captured a blurry image that could have been Allison. Allison's mother, Yendrai, went to the bridge half a mile from their home to pick up her daughter but did not see her. She tried to stay calm, thinking that Allison might have gone back to the bus stop for safety. However, she did not find her there either. She finally thought that Allison had not seen her and had gone home on her own. When Yendrai returned home, she found that Allison was not there. She immediately called relatives and friends to ask for help in the search. About 30 minutes later, Harold woke up and received a call from his Aunt Samara saying Allison was missing. He tried to contact Yendrai but was unsuccessful. 3 hours later, Yendrai reported Allison missing to the police, and the search began. Luckily, Yendrai had the last photo of Allison in the clothes she was wearing. Police checked several locations, from the bus stop to Allison's house, Katchi Lake, and the nearby hydroelectric dam. On March 5, 2020, police found their first clue, Allison's glasses in the grass about a mile from her house. However, Allison seemed to have disappeared without a trace. 8 days later, they discovered Allison's identification on a coffee plantation. This was surprising because they had checked the area several times before. What was even more suspicious was that her ID was placed in such a conspicuous and clean location. As if someone had intentionally placed it there to mislead the investigation or hide something. 15 days after Allison went missing, Yendrai received a call from Allison's father. Instead of showing concern or offering help, he said that Allison was missing because she was too beautiful. Shocked by these insensitive words, Yendrai immediately hung up the phone, unable to believe what she had just heard. For a long time, the family, police, and volunteers continued to search for Allison. Every Sunday, they hung up posters with her picture. One day, they decided to paint messages on the streets, recreating Allison's journey from the intersection to the bridge, where she was believed to have disappeared. They also put up posters on roadside poles to attract the attention of passers-by. At the same time, the police received an important clue. A man came to the police station and said that he knew Allison and had seen her on the night she disappeared. According to the man, at around 8:30 p.m. On March 4th, he left his home on his motorbike to pick someone up. On the way, he saw Allison and a burgundy two-door BMW parked next to her. He turned around to check on the situation and realized it was his cousin's BMW. He was 100% sure of this because the car had distinctive bright yellow headlights. Another witness also confirmed to the police that he had seen the same BMW near where Allison went missing that evening. The car belonged to Nelson Sanchez Urania, 28, nicknamed Sukia. Locals called him that because they believed he was a member of a gang in the area. In fact, Nelson and Allison knew each other. Their families had been acquainted for a long time and had lived in the same neighborhood for a while. However, according to Allison's mother, they had only interacted with Nelson a few times. It was just a normal neighborly relationship, not a close friendship. One day, Nelson offered to give Allison and her cousins a ride home. She agreed because it was morning, she was not alone. And she thought Nelson was a good person. On March 2, 2020, 2 days before Allison went missing, Nelson contacted her via Facebook. He sent a message asking Allison to answer some questions. On her cousin's advice, Allison agreed to answer them. Next, Nelson asked Allison about her feelings for him. Specifically, he wanted to know if Allison liked him. Allison was confused by Nelson's sudden question, as they were not close and barely knew each other. When Allison asked why, Nelson explained that he did not have a negative opinion of her but wanted to know if she thought badly of him. Allison reassured Nelson that she did not hate him and that everything was normal between them. Nelson thanked her and said goodbye. Police searched Nelson's home and seized his car, cell phone, and computer. Investigators found shocking images of women being abused on his phone. When they inspected the car, they found that it had been thoroughly cleaned with car polish. However, the front driver's seat carpet and trunk carpet had been removed. Police found hair and blood on the trunk lid and sent samples to a lab for analysis. After examining the exterior of the car, police used a police dog to search for traces. The dog detected possible blood on the two front seats and in the trunk. To confirm, the police used a luminol test, a chemical that reacts with hemoglobin in the blood. The results showed that there were many blood stains on the car's interior, despite the owner's efforts to remove them with cleaning products. While waiting for the results from the lab, Nelson remained free but was closely monitored by the police. They monitored his every move to prevent him from leaving the city or the country. Although Yendrai repeatedly requested his arrest, the police did not have enough evidence to do so. Therefore, Nelson continued to live freely without being prosecuted for many months. Yendrai believed that Allison had been kidnapped for ransom. She tried to stay calm and hoped that her daughter was still alive. In preparation for Allison's return, Yendrai kept her daughter's room as it was, not cleaning or rearranging the furniture. She even bought Allison a gift. Yendrai told the press, "I will continue to do so. As long as there is no evidence that she is dead, I still believe that my daughter is alive and will return home." Laboratory test results confirmed that the hair and blood found in Nelson's car belonged to Allison. The police immediately arrested Nelson. Later, his ex-girlfriend told the police that Nelson had never physically abused her but had put a lot of mental pressure on their relationship. Specifically, he forbade her from contacting her friends and using the internet. According to her, Nelson only wanted to have a sexual relationship with her. His previous boss revealed that he was very irresponsible at work and even stole about $11,000. Additionally, his landlord said an ex-girlfriend had broken up with him because she was tired of paying his debts. She described him as a very spoiled man. After that, Nelson confessed to his crimes against Allison. He said that on the night of Allison's disappearance, he found her walking alone on a deserted road. Taking advantage of the late hour and their acquaintance, Nelson offered to give Allison a ride. She agreed and got into the car without suspicion. However, instead of taking her home, Nelson drove to a remote coffee plantation and forced Allison out of the car. Nelson violently attacked her, knocking off her glasses and leaving her nearly unconscious. He dragged her to a nearby abandoned house, where he raped and brutally beat her. Nelson then tied her hands with cloth and duct tape to the front seat of his car. Finally, he stuffed her into the trunk of the car and drove to a dumpster in San Gerano Caci. There, the killer pushed Allison off a cliff into a pile of trash below. He justified his heinous actions by saying that he was under the influence of drugs. He also admitted that he had long been obsessed with Allison, and when he saw her that night, he decided it was his chance to carry out his dark intentions. Surprisingly, Nelson later recanted his initial statement, accusing the police of coercing him into confessing. However, the authorities had enough evidence to charge him despite his denials. The suspect could face a maximum sentence of 35 years in prison. In the early morning of September 4th, a search party went to the San Ano landfill to look for Allison's body. However, because the area was large and difficult to access, finding Allison's remains was an extremely difficult task. Moreover, it had been 6 months since Allison went missing. Just 25 days after Allison confessed, the police discovered a number of important pieces of evidence. They found human bone fragments, including a spine, ribs, part of the pelvis, and a femur. They also found pieces of clothing that Allison was wearing on the day she disappeared, along with a pair of sneakers with studs inside. All of these clues were sent for testing and thorough analysis by the police. Jose Francisco Herrera, the suspect's defense attorney, questioned the authenticity of the evidence because it was found by volunteers, not professional police. He also said that the discovery of the remains coincided with the time his client declared his innocence, which was suspicious. Rodrigo Era, the attorney representing Allison's family, on the other hand, criticized the suspect's change of testimony, saying that it undermined the credibility of the official investigation. On October 5, 2020, experts confirmed that the remains found belonged to Allison. Because only a partial body was found, they were unable to determine the exact cause of death. However, examination of the remains revealed multiple fractures that appeared after death, suggesting she may have fallen from a great height. Her clothes were torn and her sneakers had bite marks, suggesting a possible animal attack. This would explain why the remains were found scattered in different areas of the landfill. Allison's mother, Yendrai, is furious with the police for not listening and acting promptly. She believes that if they had arrested Nelson sooner, he would have confessed and Allison's body would have been found in better condition. This is an irreparable loss for the family. Despite the terrible pain she is enduring, Yendrai finds some solace in saying, "My daughter is in a better place now, where no one can hurt her anymore." The trial of Nelson took place on July 19, 2021. Harold, Allison's boyfriend, was a key witness in the case. According to Harold's testimony, on the afternoon of March 4, 2020, at approximately 6:30 p.m., he returned home and found Allison there with her mother. Harold then left for approximately 5 to 10 minutes. When he returned, he discovered that Allison had left without saying anything. While Allison was on her way home, Harold texted her repeatedly. As soon as she got off the bus, Allison texted Harold to say that two men were following her. Concerned for her safety, Harold suggested that she take a taxi and promised to pay for it. However, Allison refused twice and said that she would run home. Harold did not receive any further response from Allison after that text message. According to his explanation, he only informed his mother of the situation. He did not contact Allison's mother, Yendrai, because his phone battery died. He then fell asleep for about 30 minutes. It was Allison's aunt who called him to inform him that his girlfriend was missing. Since then, he said he has been worried and tried to call Allison several times, but all the calls went to voicemail. He also could not be reached via WhatsApp messages. Harold said he joined the search party for a few days but then had to stop because he felt unwell and had to go to work. He really wished things had gone differently. If he could go back in time, he would have taken Allison home that night. However, unfortunately, what happened cannot be changed. On August 18, 2021, the court sentenced Nelson to 18 years in prison for taking the life of Allison. He could have received twice the sentence, but the judge pointed out that there was no evidence to confirm that Nelson knew the route and time Allison would return home and that he planned to attack her. Furthermore, due to the condition of Allison's remains, there was no evidence that Nelson forced her to have sex. The story does not end there. Allison's family was not satisfied with the original sentence, arguing that it was not commensurate with the crime. In 2022, they successfully appealed, and the court decided to retry the case. As a result, on September 28, 2023, Nelson was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Allison's family's lawyer emphasized that Nelson acted in a cruel and inhumane manner and took advantage of the trust of the victim and her relatives. The court ruled that Nelson's actions were intentional. Nelson used his long-standing relationship with Allison to commit the crime. The criminal court also took into account Nelson's lack of remorse for his actions. Although still hurt and angry, the victim's family was relieved by the new verdict. The decision ended a painful chapter in their lives that lasted more than 3 years and put an end to this nightmare. Allison's family created a memorial at the spot where her body was found. They placed a cross, flowers, and a small altar with a photo of Allison and a statue of the Virgin Mary. Allison's case has caused a stir in Costa Rican media and social media. It has also led to many marches in memory of Allison and other women who have been victims of similar violence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brayla Stone. Brayla Stone, a 17-year-old girl born and raised in North Little Rock, Arkansas, stands out for her fun-loving and outgoing personality. She lives in the suburb of Sherwood. Brayla is very active on social media, especially Instagram, where she attracts many followers thanks to her unique sense of humor. Despite being transgender and sometimes facing negative reactions from some people in the community, Brayla is always proud of who she is. She is not afraid to stand up for herself and oppose negative words or actions directed at her or her lifestyle. Brayla lives confidently and strongly, not letting anything stand in her way. Brayla naturally expresses her femininity in her daily life and on social media. This is shown not only through her style of dress and makeup but also through her behavior and communication with people. She realizes that true confidence comes from accepting and loving yourself, not from trying to meet other people's expectations. Despite life's challenges, Brayla persists in pursuing her dreams and holding on to her beliefs. She hopes to one day stand in a spotlight, proudly showing her true self to the world. Brayla is a strong and admirable girl. We use the pronoun she when talking about Brayla to show respect and acknowledge her gender identity. In 2020, Brayla began a relationship with Trevone Hayes Miller, an 18-year-old who worked at a local Arby's. However, Trevone has a troubled past. Trevone was involved in a murder when he was 14 and was part of a criminal gang. In April 2016, Trevone and two older teens plotted to rob Brian Thompson, a 17-year-old marijuana dealer. They lured Brian to the parking lot of a local recreation center, promising to buy his merchandise. Trevone was carrying a BB gun, while one of his friends was carrying a real gun. While Brian was making the transaction, the older teen suddenly shot Brian in the neck and stole $15. The group then fled. Brian's death highlights the brutality and guilt of Trevone and his gang's actions. It is clear that Trevone was a dangerous criminal. This raises the question of why Brayla would choose to date someone like that. It is possible that Brayla did not know about Trevone's criminal past, or that there were other factors in their relationship that we do not know about. Everyone has their own preferences and choices, and sometimes relationships do not follow conventional standards. However, not all young women are attracted to men with complicated pasts. Each woman has her own criteria when choosing a partner. Some may be attracted by empathy or hope that the other person will change for the better, while others may seek stability and security in the relationship. Police found about a pound of marijuana in the car and arrested all three suspects within a day of the shooting. Security cameras near the scene captured their images, leading to their quick arrest. Trevone, the youngest of the group, was initially charged with murder. However, he agreed to cooperate with the investigation and was prepared to testify against his co-defendants. This resulted in his charges being reduced to armed robbery in juvenile court. Although Trevone did not have to testify because his co-defendants pleaded guilty, he was prepared to disclose text messages in court. These messages showed that Trevone was the mastermind behind the robbery plan, despite being the youngest of the group. Trevone initially planned to commit the robbery at an abandoned house they had been using as a hideout. As a result, Trevone only served a short time in juvenile detention. Two older accomplices were convicted and remain in custody. In 2019, Trevone was arrested again for robbery and impersonation. He posed as a security guard at a Walmart and attempted to rob two customers in the parking lot. A few months later, he was arrested again on weapons charges. In 2020, Trevone and Brayla had a romantic and sexual relationship for a while. Brayla was a confident transgender person but still faced social stigma. She understood that not everyone accepted her. When she began her relationship with Trevone, Brayla agreed to keep it a secret. Although Trevone knew Brayla was transgender, he still felt uncomfortable making the relationship public. He feared the negative reaction from society and the possible consequences. Instead of public his relationship with Brayla, Trevone kept the relationship a secret. Their conflict escalated when Brayla discovered that Trevone was having an affair with another woman. Feeling betrayed, Brayla threatened to expose their relationship. Trevone responded by inviting Brayla to his home and offering to pay her to keep quiet. Trevone's fear causes him to have negative thoughts. Instead of facing society and taking responsibility, he wants to eliminate Brayla to keep the secret. Trevone tells her about his intentions through a phone call. However, she does not take the threat seriously, believing that Trevone only says it when he is agitated. She tries to calm him down and hopes that things will work out on their own. After the phone call, Brayla went to Trevone's home. A friend confirmed this while talking to Brayla on the phone as she was waiting for Trevone to open the door. About 5 hours after meeting Trevone, Brayla texted the friend, saying she was unhappy and they had been arguing for hours. Sadly, this was one of the last times anyone heard from Brayla. The next morning, a passerby called the police to report a body in a park in the Sherwood area of North Little Rock. Police found Brayla's body in a black Saturn Vue on a gravel road near 7224 Vista Point Court, which overlooks Gap Creek Drive. North Little Rock police had reported Brayla missing shortly before the discovery. When police arrived on the scene, they found the body of Brayla, a 17-year-old girl, in an abandoned car on a gravel road. She had been shot to death, with a gunshot wound to the head. Brayla's body was found lying face up on the floor in front of the passenger seat, with her legs extended behind the seat. The driver's side window was broken. The police report noted that there was blood inside the car and a strong smell of bleach. Investigators also found some of the interior upholstery discolored, possibly from exposure to bleach. News of Brayla's death has been widely reported in the media. Notably, her family requested that articles about Brayla use the pronoun he and her birth name, contrary to her expressed preferences prior to her death. It was clear that there was a clear disagreement between Brayla and her family about her identity. This was demonstrated by their lack of respect for her gender identity, even after her death. In the obituary, the family used an old image of Brayla before her transition, which caused a sense of disappointment and regret. Instead of celebrating Brayla for who she was, the family chose to present a past image that she had tried to change. This reflects the difficulties in society in accepting and respecting diversity in gender identity. After Brayla passed away, an Instagram account named Tap and Season commented that they killed her for $5,000 and posted pictures of money as evidence. In the next 24 hours, this account received a lot of criticism. Finally, the account owner admitted that he was just a 15-year-old kid making up stories to get attention. This thoughtless action is not only irresponsible but also deserves strong condemnation. The baseless confession of murder has caused more grief for Brayla's family and friends and affected the whole community. Anxiety and insecurity in the community are increasing as people read the comments and wonder if there is a real killer on the loose in Sherwood. The fact that the police have not arrested the imposter has only made the situation more tense. While this child may not face legal consequences, his actions have had serious repercussions. Hopefully, as he grows up, he will realize his mistakes and learn a valuable lesson about the importance of honesty and respect for others. After a week of investigation, the police arrested Trevone. According to reports, Trevone quickly became the prime suspect in the case. A friend of Brayla provided important information to the police. Brayla was with Trevone on the night of her murder, and the location where Brayla's body was found was a place Trevone frequently went to have sex, due to its proximity to his residence in Sherwood. After Brayla's death, Trevone's manager at Arby's contacted him. During the conversation, Trevone appeared very upset and said that he had screwed everything up and would not be returning to work for a long time. Although the manager tried to ask Travone what had happened, he only replied that she would know soon. Upon hearing that Brayla's body had been discovered, the manager immediately reported the conversation to the police. With this information and other evidence, Travone was finally arrested on August 3rd. At trial, prosecutors alleged that Travone had murdered Brayla to prevent her from revealing their sexual relationship. According to the indictment, Brayla had discovered that Travone was dating another woman and planned to retaliate by making their previous intimate relationship public. Fearing that he would be labeled a homosexual, Travone allegedly paid Brayla to keep the matter quiet. However, when he learned that Brayla was still planning to reveal the information, Travone killed her. At the time of the murder, Travone, who was 19 years old, was charged with murder. He called his manager at Arby's to express his remorse for his actions. "I'm in big trouble and I could be dead," Travone said. "I screwed up and I won't be able to come back for a long time." Travone initially faced a murder charge that could have carried a life sentence or the death penalty. However, he agreed to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence through a deal with prosecutors. The investigation found similarities between Brayla's murder and that of 17-year-old Brian Allen Thompson. Brian was murdered in April 2016 in the parking lot of the Bill Harmon Recreation Center in Sherwood. A center employee discovered Brian dead behind the wheel, having been shot in the neck. Travone is one of 3 teens charged with his murder. Sherwood Detective Craig Grisham noted that in both cases, the killer fired from the passenger seat, making it difficult for the victim in the driver's seat to escape. Craig also mentioned in his arrest affidavit that both murders occurred at locations Travone was familiar with, close to his home and convenient for him to escape undetected. While Travone did not kill Brian, he witnessed the crime from the back seat of the victim's car, according to his testimony to investigators. A Pulaski County court has convicted Travone Hayes Miller, 20, of the murder of Brayla Stone. Brayla, 17, was shot and killed in the Sherwood neighborhood of North Little Rock on June 25, just days before her 18th birthday. Travone was sentenced to a total of 50 years in prison, 40 years for first-degree murder and 10 years for unlawful use of a weapon. He has been in custody since his arrest. About a week after the murder, Travone must serve at least 35 years before he can apply for parole, which means he will be 53 when he becomes eligible for early release. The plea agreement, negotiated by attorney Burke Moore and Deputy U.S. Attorney John Johnson, reduced Travone's charge to 1 count of murder. Brayla was one of 44 transgender people in the United States murdered in 2020, the highest number ever recorded, though the actual number is likely higher, as 34 additional deaths have been reported since. Many other victims may not have been recorded due to misidentification of name or gender, or because their deaths were not fully reported. Ashley Marie Preston, a journalist and transgender activist, has spoken out about Brayla's murder and called for action. She also objected to the media using Brayla's birth name instead of her real name, despite Brayla's family requesting to use her pre-transition name and pronouns. Local groups will hold a candlelight vigil tonight at Bull Park in Little Rock to protest the incident. A Change.org petition has received more than 100,000 signatures to date. The Center for the Revolution in the Arts, a youth organization in Little Rock, describes Brayla as someone who always made space for others to be themselves. They invite mourners to wear red and purple, Brayla's favorite colors. On Facebook, the organization emphasizes the importance of honoring Brayla's memory and seeking justice for her. Brayla was not just an individual, but a shining example of dignity and courage. She faced many hardships and pressures that others can hardly understand. However, Brayla always maintained her faith and desire to live a free and happy life.